Take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we are discussing something that, especially if you're in the States, you have probably heard of through assigned middle school or high school reading of The Grapes of Wrath. Honestly, I did have to read The Grapes of Wrath, but I completely forgot that it was placed during the actual Dust Bowl.
Crushed the movie. The movie was great. I don't think I ever attempted. The book's like 600. It's thick. It's a big old book.
I obviously have no recollection because I can't even remember how thick it was. I just remember it was not exciting reading.
No. And so much of this, it's not made for cinema. Like, there's not a lot of action going on.
There's not a lot of excitement. There's nothing to be excited about from these people.
But we can jazz that up. The true stories that these people lived through and went through is just, it's awe-inspiring. And throughout everything that happens during the Dust Bowl, you have to remember that there's just this impending sense of doom over everybody that's living through it. And then on a greater plane, there's this impending sense of doom of the Great Depression that's going on at the same time.
I didn't realize that they were at the same time. And kind of, from what I know just of the Great Depression, that's going to be an eye-opening episode, I think, especially even looking just into the Dust Bowl and how the Great Depression impacted it, but then also how the Dust Bowl impacted the Great Depression. The fact that both of these, you not only had the worldwide economic fallout of the Great Depression, but then you also had what is basically the biggest ecological disaster in United States history. Man-made, I think they consider some natural disasters like hurricanes that really, mess stuff up to be larger. But this was something that at one point, they were looking at the entire Great Plains of the United States. And the Great Plains essentially start up in Canada, in the Dakotas, maybe part of Montana. Mm-hmm. And then they are just this strip that comes right down basically on the west side of the Mississippi River it's the section between the Mississippi kind of.
And the Rockies.
Yep. It's this huge, just flat expanse. It's the place where essentially most of the Native American tribes were because that's where the buffalo were and everything. And it was just this plain of grass that would cause these, insane herds to just migrate across, and that's what the Native Americans would follow. But when you get an area this large that gets taken over and basically terraformed by people who have no idea really what they're doing, that are just looking at the financial aspects of it, and then all of a sudden, things are going good. Things are going real good for a while. But when they go bad in conjunction with the Great Depression, it's crazy to think that people stuck this out.
Yeah, you want to say that it's a triumph of the human spirit, but at the same time, is it just a letdown of human intelligence?
Well, when the government is also be like, we should just fucking cut our losses and just get out of this area.
If the government wants to get out, you should probably get out too.
Get out of a fourth of the country and just be like, let's just chalk it up.
The government doesn't see any hope of squeezing pennies out of people and they get out of the situation, it's probably not a good situation for you.
It's also a combination of, this isn't newly acquired territory because Louisiana Purchase happened, before this and everything, but it's still not it's not a civilized place in any sense of large cities, anything like that, amenities. But there's just this push that we're going to talk about kind of leading up to why these people are here in this area of let's see what we can do to incentivize just shoving people west, trying to take up these areas.
We're not talking a small amount of people. We're talking millions of people that went out here and farmed this land.
All right, guys. Well, before we get into it, remember wherever you listen to your podcast, rate us as high as you possibly can. We appreciate it. Keep the feedback coming. The comments on the episodes, we love to see them and everything. We take a lot of suggestions down for future episodes, so keep that up. Got anything else?
We are very close. I think we're at 1,800 ratings on Spotify. I know it's a little thing, and it's kind of annoying to have to go up and find the stars and do the ratings instead of just listening and enjoy it. We love that you guys love to listen and enjoy it. If that's all we can ask from you is just to throw that 5 stars up there and get us to 2,000. It just boosts us in the ratings. It puts us on the Spotify main pages on the podcast to watch, and it just grows it. And the more it grows, the better it does, kind of the more freedom we will have to be able to do some stuff with it.
Spread the good word. And with that said, let's get into the Dust Bowl. Why the fuck are these people out there?
Yeah,
I also made it to 5 minutes and 9 seconds without swearing.
I think he got one in a little earlier.
Did I?
Yeah.
I don't even notice
It was
anymore,
maybe
apparently.
the mics didn't pick it up. Maybe it was under your breath. Homesteading. The manifest destiny to go west, to spread your wild oats on whatever land that you land on, and you can kind of create a life for yourself. 1841, you have the Preemption Act, which allowed settlers to claim up to 160 acres. Will you look up how big an acre is?
Yeah.
Just because I forgot.
I always, when I try to work it out in my head, I always remember that my dad made a big deal of a buddy of his. They bought an acre, and I hung out at that friend's house a lot. And so I kind of have visually in my head what an acre is. It's decent.
It's a vast expanse of land. To think you can pull 160 acres of federal lands. You're going to pay for this $1.25 an acre. There are qualifications that come with it. You have to be 21 years or older, or the head of a household, which, again, sounds kind of whatever. Head of a household back then could be a woman. Head of a household could be a widow with children that was able to go out and buy these lands. Mm-hmm. Back then, who could vote? Not women, but landowners.
Yeah, interesting, right?
Yeah, so there was a chance. I don't know what in the head. They're going to vote for president, and that's it, because it's not like you said, there's not cities of mayors or governors of states or anything like that.
So it's 43,560 square feet. Visually, an easier way to do it. Everyone is at least somewhat familiar with either a football field, soccer pitch, whatnot. It's about 70 yards by 70 yards. That comes out to about 44,000 square feet. So just a shade under that. So 70 by 70 yards.
That's pretty big.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go claim up to 160 of those for yourself. Of course, you have to have the money. In 1841, I don't know what the banking situation looked like, but we're going to talk about as you're buying these acres of land and these parcels later on, you're buying them on credit, because it's not like you have $160 plus whatever the 25 cents accumulates that to. That's not just like pocket money that you have.
And also the fact that a lot of these people are probably immigrants or people that have moved to the country, maybe have been there, their family's been there for one generation, not being able to own any type of land over in Europe because everything is already spoken for. It's a lot smaller, just area itself. The opportunity to basically have land, have the opportunity to be self-sufficient, to actually be able to work and keep that profit for yourself. That's really, really appealing to these people.
Well, and it's perfect for what you just say, because you either had to be a citizen or you had to be an immigrant that had declared to become a U.S. citizen. Mm-hmm. So you can go be an immigrant. You can move out onto this land as long as you become a citizen within the 5-year minimum that you had. It was, 5-year minimum. You could go from being an immigrant to a citizen and have 160 acres of land. That's a pretty big shift in 5 years of your life.
And also 1840s, 1850s, all the way up to the 1900s. Even you think 160 acres in the grand scope of things, of all that open land, it is a drop in the bucket, kind mm-hmm. of. At the same time, you're farming all of this by hand or by horse and plow. That's insane to have to so this is just insane. These people going out here aren't going out to do something easy.
No, not at all. Homesteading doesn't sound easy in the slightest. And I know that there's a lot of homesteading influencers just by the amount of podcasts that I saw in that kind of thing.
It's completely different.
It's very, very different. A lot of the Industrial Revolution changed homesteading mm-hmm. for a lot easier purposes. Just to finish up these requirements, you had to be a resident on the land for a minimum of 14 months. You couldn't leave the land for longer than 6 months without it being basically a kangaroo court or whatever. The deal was you had to improve the land for 5 years. So you would have to farm it. You would have to build a house. You would have to do something to improve whatever acreage that you got. It doesn't mean you have to improve the whole 160 acres. You just have to kind of turn it into a legitimate farm. You have to fence this thing off.
You're also requiring people to set down roots, which if things get bad, they're much less likely to leave something. We're going to talk about some differences in these people that head into what essentially is, the Great Plains. The area that's going to be affected by the dust storms and the Dust Bowl and everything, it spans parts of Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Kansas, and Colorado. Tons of people are affected by this. But if you can have somebody there that's already put in the work to the land, built a house, all of that, if a few scarce years come by, that's, those people are much more likely to stay there. So you're planting an insurance policy as well, even though these people are paying for the land, which if you don't have them paying for the land, no one else is going out there to do this kind of stuff. So you're already making money off of it. But then at the same time, you're saying we're going to require them to stay also because we're probably going to need a source of buying their wheat and everything. Yeah.
It's an investment in their future based upon people that are basically pot committed to having to stay there through the good times and the bad because they've spent everything that they could. They have a massive loan they have to pay back. Land Donation Claim Act of 1850 basically opened up the Oregon Territory for white folks and for what they called half-breed Native Americans.
So the other half, I'm guessing, would have to be white.
Have to be. I don't think they were giving that to anybody else.
So this is the additional push. Like, you guys aren't far enough west. Keep going. Keep going.
Perfect. Yes, you're talking about an area on the West Coast that had Europeans in it already, and you were that close to Asia. I'm assuming that we knew that Asia was on the other side by then. We had made it past Columbus.
I should hope so.
But at the same time, it's an area so far away from where your population is that you have to have people go and stake that claim, or else you're going to have a bunch of Frenchmen in there trying to steal your land again.
What's the instructions there? Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to cross the Great Plains. You're going to see a bunch of people already there, but you're going to need to keep going. Then you're going to see some really big mountains.
Yeah.
You're going to need to keep going.
Other side.
Eventually, on the other side of those mountains should be some areas that you guys are able to set up in.
Paradise, Pacific Northwest, where we live, one of the most beautiful areas of the country. Of course, we're going to be
a little biased.
Yeah. At the same time, if you don't live near mountains, I just don't know if you're living.
We also have that sweet, sweet non-regional diction, which I don't even know if you can consider that now because most regions have addiction. So
we got addictions
and addiction.
Yeah, we have addictions. We don't have a real big diction. They're normal sized dictions.
Yeah.
But.
This area also was during kind of the early explorers to make their way across the Great Plains when they're doing surveys, when they're kind of determining what the size and scope of this newly acquired territory is. They dubbed this area the Great American Desert. And they're looking around. They've come from the East Coast. They've come from the Appalachians. Is that how you pronounce it?
I think so.
You've seen forests, you've seen rivers, you have this source of timber, all this area. And then you work your way out on the Great Plains and you're just like, there's not a lot of water around here. And there's also not a lot of trees. Their first instinct on this area kind of was the right instinct, in which they were just like, no, like modern agriculture will not take root here.
And it was grassland. It was just made to feed bison.
It was called buffalo grass for a reason. But the thing, too, is as simple as that is, of just looking at it and saying, well, grass grows here. Mm-hmm. Trees, don't grow here. We could probably plant some stuff that grows like grass, and then we could probably plant some trees, too, just because trees have not evolved here or been able to grow here for the last, few thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years, doesn't mean that we can't completely turn this thing around and start planting timber trees and doing that as well.
Yeah, it couldn't be, because it blows so hard that trees just don't really have a chance. And then the soil is only so deep that a root system can go.
Well, and then there's, there's all of these, it's kind of the snake oil salesman type pitch where people are coming out trying to, sell off certain properties that like these larger conglomerations eventually acquire.
Oh yeah, we're getting into that soon.
Yeah, but with the buffalo grass, this is great for grazing because the herd just simply moves on. What little water actually occurs in this area, I think they said average, the area received less than 20 inches annually.
15 to 20 maybe. Anything 10 and below is considered a desert.
Yeah. And there are times that there's going to be a large portion of time when this is considered a desert. But this grass is basically able to recover over long periods of time because the buffalo are moving on and everything. It's not just constantly being, fed upon, essentially.
Well, and any water that it gets, it's going to be able to hold in its root system. It's going to be right there.
So they said a good indicator was, yeah, totally take these plots and everything. Watch. In fact, we can guarantee it for you. Go out there. It's going to be grown with buffalo grass. Dig down 12 inches and you're going to find moist soil. And they would dig down 12 inches. And they'll be like, oh shit, there is moisture here. We're totally set. We're golden. What they didn't realize was that, yeah, this buffalo grass had evolved over hundreds of thousands, millions of years to basically be able to grow in this area, which meant that the root systems could hold moisture. They also went down like 5 feet below the ground. So guess what? They're really digging for that water to be able to get that.
Yeah, the only reason the moisture is in the soil is because of the grass on top of the soil. It's not just because the soil's great. It's because what's growing out of it is efficient.
And what's crazy too is you're just like, you don't think about the aspect of like, it's also grown in a way that it's resistant to wind. It has a deep root system. It doesn't get picked up and blown away. It also probably shades the soil a little bit, so it doesn't dry out as much. It's evolved for this. And all these people are just coming in being like, oh yeah, we can totally just completely change the landscape here and use this however we want to with zero impact.
We'll knock it all out. It won't be a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Homestead Act, 1862. Part of the reason for the Oregon Territory, just like Chris talks about, with how hard it was to get there. If you get there and you're a single guy, you can claim 320 acres. If you're a married couple, you can claim 640 acres. So the juice is more worth the squeeze if you're going to get basically double the amount of land.
I have a morbid thought. You start out married. By the time you get there, she's dead, and you're technically not married anymore. Do you still get the additional acreage?
You're going to have to weekend at Bernie's her for like 5 years till you get to that proving point.
Or at least bring proof of, yeah.
Or find somebody else within that 5 years to come be the stand-in.
Yeah.
Homestead Act of 1862.
Kidnap a fucking Native American girl and just be like, yeah, this is Dorothy.
Hi, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
This one gets a little bit more contentious because now we're talking about Confederacy. Now we're talking about Civil War times. 1862 basically sought to reduce this price for land ownership for everybody. 1861, the Southern Dixiecrats decide to leave Congress. They're out. We're getting the separation of the Confederacy in the U.S. As soon as they leave, all of the problems that he had in Congress go away. Lincoln can go ahead and pass and sign this act. All the preemption requirements were still in effect, so as far as the age and everything goes, except for this time, if you were under 21, if you had served in either a regular or voluntary force for the Army or Navy, I'm not sure why they held the Air Force out at that point, for at least 14 days of actual war, either foreign or domestic, and if you never bore arms against the United States or gave aid to anybody that did, you could do it. Obviously, the Air Force thing's a joke. Didn't have anything that flew back then.
You could throw stuff.
Yeah, true. The difference was, instead of having to pay per acre, this was a $10 application fee. And then there would be an additional $8 that you would have to pay upon this 5 years of improvement. The only thing that you had to get for 5 years of improvement, I feel like this is insane. Because if you have a crappy neighbor, that's not going to go well. If you have two good neighbors, you probably can slack off a little bit. The deal was, in order to make this all legit, you had to have two neighbors come and sign as witnesses that you've improved this property.
This is why you're helping your neighbors out at
Constantly,
every opportunity. Yeah.
Because the fate of your land is kind of in their hands as long as you're a good neighbor.
Yeah, just don't be a dick. You'll be able to keep your land. There was also this huge promotion of this thing called the yeoman farmer. It was, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Y-E-O-M-A-N farmer. So this was a term referring to basically a farmer who owns and cultivates their own land. Usually family-run farms. They were not using like hired labor. It was a family business. This had such appeal because you have all these people also that came over from Europe that if they were farmers, they weren't working their own land. They were renting land. They were having to kick money that they were making up to, the landlords and everything. So there was this huge promotion of like the Great Plains are home to this self-owning, new opportunity where you can, reap all of the fruits of your labors. And this was something that the United States government really propagated that, this is where you and your family can create, generational wealth. And there was a guy that when we were watching that Ken Burns documentary talked about the dude whose goal it was he acquired the 160 acres and then he had acquired some additional land that like a neighboring farm guy must have been an asshole because he didn't get to keep his land, or actually he might've went tits up, but his goal was to acquire and be able to provide each of his 5 sons, like 540 acres.
It was a square mile, wasn't it?
Something like that. But just that there's this thing about, you can already see kind of the propaganda. I can imagine the posters of like the silhouette of the guy like reaping in the giant thing of wheat and everything, holding a money bag in the other hand.
It's the American dream personified. That's how you sell that. Eventually, after the Civil War happens, there's some attempts at rekindling the Southern Homestead Act of 1866. Allowed poor Southern tenant farmers and sharecroppers the opportunities that the North had in 1862. After that, you get the Timber Culture Act of 1873, which was up to 160 acres of land. The caveat here was you had to plant in between, I believe they started out at 40 acres, then they realized how hard it was to plant 40 acres worth of trees by yourself. They lowered it down to a minimum of 10, but still 10 acres of trees is a hell of a lot of trees.
The area that all these people are moving into would see these periods of drought, but they were long enough away that there was enough time for, you would also get like, on the other side, you would get also periods of really intense and unusual amount of like rainfall and everything. So what would happen is all of a sudden this area would come out of a drought. And because there weren't a ton of people there during this kind of initial settlement period, there weren't a lot of people to also be like, hey, we're causing an issue. No, they just went, they couldn't grow anything on their smaller pieces of land. With, when the rainfall would come, all of a sudden, these people on these smaller pieces are generating all of this, all of these crops and everything. And that's the image that they're using to go ahead and sell this. So you have these big booms that don't take that long. They take a matter of just years, where you would think a migration would take decades or anything. You would have, all of these stories coming from the Great Plains saying, people are making a lot of money doing this. People would be leaving the East Coast to go over and do this. And so the people that are coming in within those first few years are like, oh yeah, this place rains, it rains enough to grow this kind of stuff. You have like these 25-year periods to 30-year periods where stuff's really good. You're moving all of these people in as quickly as you can. And then all of a sudden, this 5 years of drought that's, in juxtaposition to this 5-year period that you had with heavy rainfall, you have so many more people there that this is going to affect.
Do you think that there was ever a time once the drought started that they went to a reservation? Like, hey, can you tell us about the weather patterns in your guys' land?
Nope.
Well, the natives were probably like, yeah, it's really good for like 20, 25, 30 years, completely great. And then there's some years of drought. The guy's like, well, how many years of drought? He's like, that's what I'm not going to tell you.
Like, honestly, like what we did is just when things got shitty here, we were following the bison. They would leave knowing that the drought was coming, and we would just follow them. So we never really had to deal with it.
Yeah, so you guys just follow the bison, you'll be good. We killed all the bison?
Oh, of course you did.
Oh, yeah, then you're hosed. So
Civil War, 1865, that's when that ends.
Yep.
Also, the area is known for high winds because there's no windbreaks.
Yep.
So, sorry, keep jumping back to that. First Transcontinental Railroad was completed in 1869. Crazy. So all of a sudden, you now have at that time, what passed for a mass transportation system that's not only able to bring a ton of people out there, but you're able to now get supplies and all that kind of stuff and start establishing these, basically what would be whatever the equivalent of these wheat towns to like little boom towns that would like during the gold rush that would spring up.
You're also getting the veins that are going off that Transcontinental Railroad to these other places that didn't have that opportunity before.
You also started to get this, it was a saying that they would use repeatedly when trying to sell these pieces of land and get people to go out there that had any questions about like, well, we still hear that it doesn't rain that much out there. Yeah, it's enough to grow some stuff, but still, if it's just enough rain to do that, and then at any point it drops down, they're like, don't worry. The rain follows the plow, because what it does when you till up the land is it releases these particulates into the air, and they go into the clouds in the atmosphere, and they seed them for rain. So yeah, so any place that these places, any place that you're putting a plow down, the rain will eventually come. Like, well, how did you guys determine that? Well, see, about 5 years ago, when it was really dry and everything, people came out and more people were plowing, and then it started raining again. So it definitely had to be because of the plows.
Had to be. This is Charlie explaining that he burns the trash to heat the bar, and then the smoke goes up in the air and turns into stars. It doesn't make any sense. There's no science behind that.
Yeah. So you get this, bison get wiped out, basically, and all of a sudden you've still got all of this buffalo grass.
Yeah.
It's going to be perfect for cattle. So you get this period called the beef bonanza, which basically saw all of these mass herds of cattle being, moved across the Great Plains. Well, cattle are going to be kept even if you're letting them graze open plains. There's a amount of space that you're going to allow these. You're not just going to let them wander off because they'll never come back. So keeping them in an area where they're not really migrating the ways that the buffalo herds did, and also the fact that the herds were controlled essentially by natural selection, whatever you want to call it, where it would just control the size of it itself. The Native Americans had a hand in that, all that shit. When you came in and you were just killing them off and then bringing in cattle, you're bringing in as many as possible. If there's grass for them to eat, we're going to go ahead and bring in that many, even though you are completely exceeding the numbers of these natural herds that were existing in these areas. So this ends up leading to overgrazing, which ends up killing off a whole bunch of this like native buffalo grass. So it doesn't even take the farmers moving in before they're already setting this place up for, a big letdown.
And also, you can't really go in and farm successfully on land that's been stomped on by cattle. Like, it's not just because you can't use the cattle there anymore, it doesn't mean you can go and plant on it. That
was their thought, though.
Yeah. There's so many thoughts that are wrong here that it is astounding that, we're talking 1800s, I guess, 19th century.
1880s saw these few severe winters. And of course, what happens in wintertime when it starts getting cold and it's a naturally progressing bison herd? First of all, bison have thick fucking coats.
Yep.
They're adapted for this stuff. They'd also moved to other areas where they were still able to graze. When these winters hit, they killed off a ton of cattle, enough so to where they were just like, nope, Great Plains, done, not good for cattle.
What did the guy say? That there was enough dead cattle out there that he could walk like 300 miles and never step off of a cow?
Yeah, not hit ground.
1875 Homestead Act, the Indian Homestead Act. This is where we throw the natives a little bone here. Give natives the opportunity to purchase homesteads from unclaimed lands. Caveat here, they had to relinquish their tribal identity and basically cut off all of their relations. So if you want to be a good native that's going to try to assimilate...
A good American.
Yeah, an American at that point, yes. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to give you this land. In Large Homestead Act, this plays a real big factor here. In 1909, it was enacted to enable dryland farming because pretty much everywhere that was around a nice water source or river had been taken up at this point in time. So you have all this other land that you want people to populate on, so you have to start enable dryland farming. So in order to do that, you give them 320 acres instead of the original 160 for these more marginal lands that are away from the water sources, i.e. the Great Plains. Because we're between, the Missouri up north is going to be fine. It feeds into the Mississippi. There's not any giant bodies of water that go through the Great Plains, really.
So just kind of going along with that cycle of the drought and the growable seasons and everything, in the 1890s, there was an influx of farmers after the cattle were all gone because it opened up all of this land. 1890s, there was a drought, and a whole bunch of them were like, nope, not for us, and they got the fuck out. Peace out. The late 19s, so 1901 up to 1909.
The aughts.
Yeah. So between, I think, 1907, 1909, it saw one of those swing the pendulum the other way, wet periods where basically they were like, oh shit, bunch of abandoned farms, the drought's over, that can't possibly happen again. And so you saw this huge other influx that, come in and start settling and taking advantage of these homestead acts and everything. And you would get like real estate groups. They would buy these large ranches that were previously owned by the cattle companies, because as far as the cattle companies that were using this for grazing rights and everything, it wasn't like they were subject to the Homestead Act. They were just moving their cows out there to graze. So you had these huge ranches where had partitioned off land. These real estate groups are buying them up, dividing them up into these smaller 160 or even smaller plots, and then jacking up the price on them.
Which perfectly explains a company called the Capital Syndicate was given more than 3 million acres of land in the Texas Panhandle in exchange for building the Texas State Capitol building. 3 million acres of land in North Texas up in the Panhandle. 1905, the syndicate would begin parceling these plots up to sell to prospective farmers or to these real estate companies that you're talking about. They ended up selling over 800,000 acres in the Panhandle.
The term syndicate just means shitty.
There's no good syndicates out there.
Yeah. So you have this, it's precipitation's going up, the winds are going down. You have the former chancellor of the University of Kansas basically making these proclamations of, hey, guys, it's all good here now. That drought thing, it's over. It's all golden from this point forward. And there were a certain, few towns that started to kind of, like I said, establish themselves as these little boom towns. One of them that's going to kind of be a focal point of this is going to be a place called Boise City. And Boise City makes basically, it's like getting a brochure and it shows you a picture of what I would imagine like maybe kind of downtown, maybe a smaller section of New York would be. And they're like, we have it all. We have apartments, we have paved streets, we have all of this stuff. And people are like, fantastic. We're going to move the family out here. We're going to buy up all the plots of land around it. We're going to be setting up shop. They would get out there and it was like 5 buildings, a city hall, a post office, a general store, and some other stuff. And they're like, this is definitely not it. But we've also just spent so much money already buying plots that maybe were bought, not even on site. Yeah. They were just trying to buy them up because they thought that they were going to get all bought up. I want to say this company was one of the only companies in history, like real estate companies, to actually successfully be sued for like false claims.
Not only sued, criminally held liable. They were the Southwestern Immigration and Development Company. Like you said, they built Boise City as an elegant tree-lined city with paved streets and numerous businesses, railroad services. Don't know where this one comes in. An artesian well. So you're telling me we have water? Is that okay? Cool. We got water. Awesome. But
it's artesian.
Great selling point. Yeah,
because if you just said we got a well, they'd be like, I hope I have a well. Yeah. No, it's an artesian well. That makes you think of fountains.
Yeah, it did well enough. They sold 3,000 lots that were purchased. As soon as the new owners arrived, just like you said, they realized that this was all just one big lie. This has been played through so many times in life. There's a place called Hat Ranch in California that this happened where they were bringing people out. They said that they would run 2 trains a week from Kansas to bring in prospective buyers. They had basically like model lots set up to where this is how your house could look. This is what your farm could be, all this kind of stuff. Not hard to keep 2 or 3 of these looking good.
No, you just have to make sure you have enough where you're not overlapping appointments.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when you're shown a new subdivision, you're just like, no, we're going to go look at this house down there, all these people, and then we'll swap.
So once they realized that this happened and it was all lies, they pushed back on these 2 guys that were apart named J.E. Stanley and A.J. Klein. Now, the real issue here was they didn't even have the titles to the lots that they were selling to give to the new homeowner, or to give to the new lot owners. J.E. Stanley and A.J. Klein were both arrested and convicted of mail fraud, because back then it was illegal to sell or to send basically false claims through the mail. Now, clearly that got amended at some point because that's a lot of what comes through the mail nowadays.
This has got to be one of those situations where the law didn't exist because they hadn't really dealt with anything of this nature. After this happens, they're like, we got to get this guy on something, but we can't just invent a law that they hadn't actually broken. Yeah. So what can we get them on? They're like, did they send stuff through the mail? They're like, yeah. They're like, fucking been waiting for this mail fraud.
Call in the postmaster.
Yeah, I was going to say, he got there and he was just, that was what he was waiting. And he's like, finally,
I finally get to do something.
I mean, and yeah, there were repercussions for people like this, but even still, by 1910, there were 1 million+ people in the Great Plains.
Well, and that's Boise City. Even though it was basically sold as this bill of goods that didn't come through, there were some people that had staked their claim. They had paid all of their life savings for these plots. So they just decided to stay. They stay on this land. They end up developing it. The town actually ends up being incorporated. This is pretty surprising considering when this happened in 1908. By 1925, it gets incorporated. It takes a while, but eventually they get there.
Can you imagine getting off the train, seeing what it looks like, and your wife just fucking does the thing where she smacks you in the chest, and she's like, nope. He's like, we don't have enough money to get back home. I sunk everything we had into this.
Mm-hmm. Here's my wallet.
I'm not going back to your sister's house.
We don't have money to get back there even. You're just throwing cash away to make sure you don't have to go back. As Chris said earlier, this whole thing encompassed areas of Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas that sold these 160-acre plots of these lower Great Plains. The bison had all been killed. You got to do something with this land, manifest destiny, go out and make it happen. These acreages kind of fall to the easiest crop to grow, and they would mainly become wheat farms because as we roll into World War I, wheat is going to become a very precious resource.
You're out there growing shit. I don't know what you'd be growing out there. Fucking turnips, onions. I'm thinking of stuff that doesn't usually require a lot of water.
Yeah.
These things probably require a great deal of water because I have no idea what the hell I'm talking about.
Root vegetables, I think, mostly do, but grasses, I don't think do.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, you're growing this stuff because you heard that it's going to make you money, and it's not going real well for you, or it's requiring quite a bit more work. And then you look over at your neighbor who is just basically plowing it up a little bit, throwing some seed down, and then just letting it do the work, and he's making all this money off wheat. A lot less work, so you're going to be like, next season, I'm just growing wheat.
Yeah.
And it kind of just spirals like that to where basically, the Great Plains become the breadbasket of the United States, and it's just all wheat all day long. There's no incentive to grow anything else because you see that it can grow in this area. You see that it's needed. You're guys on both sides, you're making money. Why not?
Yeah. And with World War I happening and the world's changing on a global stage, as you look at it, you're going to have to start ramping up demand. There's a lot of boom times in the United States, and somehow they always seem to coincide with wartime at the same time where the economy grows as wartime just calls for it.
Well, yeah. So I guess the Germans, because they had the Soviet, or I always say that because, they had Russia blockaded. And Russia was basically the source for all of the Allies and a ton of other countries' wheat. So now all of a sudden you can't get access to that. But guess what? Wheat will win the war. They start selling, all this wheat coming off the Great Plains for $2 a bushel, $2 a bushel, which is 2 times what they were making before. So now there's even more incentive just to grow wheat.
They were $1 a bushel before. The government comes out and says, for every bushel that you give us, we will give you $2. That's a guarantee all throughout the war. Not thinking ahead past that or anything like that. Everybody's like, shit, yeah, we're going to make this happen. For everybody that doesn't understand bushels, it's around 60 pounds of wheat. It's roughly 1 million kernels of wheat, which or 1 million kernels, that's a lot. I didn't think that a bushel was 60 pounds. I grew up spending weekends at Grandpa's farm. Grandpa grew potatoes, he grew sugar beets, he grew alfalfa, and he had llamas. I don't understand how wheat works. I barely understood how any of that stuff worked. All I knew is when the sun came up, I was out there in the fields with the hired labor, and we were pushing around irrigation.
Yeah.
It sucked. It wasn't fun, but I grew up on that stuff.
And also where, I'm not saying it's easy to grow wheat because I have no idea, but the way that it was described, the way these guys are farming is it's not like you would think of modern agriculture when you drive by a field and you get that really cool visual when you look out your window and you're seeing the perfect lines going down parallel to the road. And you see that that's how they're able to flood those, furrows with water. And that's how the crops are able to grow. What they're doing with the wheat,
corn, kind of, right?
Yeah. But you're still doing that to get other crops irrigated like that. There's also a reason that you do things like that to prevent erosion. And with these guys, all they're doing is they're tilling up the ground with these, what do they call them, one-way plows?
One-way disc plows.
One-way disc plows. And all it's doing is it's just churning up a little bit of the topsoil, enough so to where you can get some seed down in there. It'll fall within the cracks. Then once it rains the next time, or you have to go back over it and everything, all of a sudden the wheat's going to grow out of there. You're not doing a ton of like really intensive, digging all of these rows and things like that. And you're getting paid extra for it now. So it's minimal work for maximum profit.
And you have the benefit of mechanization. You have actual farm tractors now, whereas instead of having horse and plow, which was originally how they would do it, a deep plow like that is going to go further into the earth. So you're going to have the natural windbreak from the furrows. And also, like you say, the dirt's going to stay in bigger chunks, less likely for it to blow away as it's clumped up, as opposed to a nice fine grained dirt that is susceptible to blowing. Just to put this into perspective, I'm going to round down here. The average wheat yield in the United States right now is around 48.6 bushels an acre. We could probably call that 40 bushels an acre just because farming techniques have gotten better, so you're able to increase your yield. If you're thinking about $2 per bushel, you're getting 40 an acre, $80 an acre that you're getting, times that by 160. That's pretty good money.
Yeah.
It's going to allow you to pay down your debts that you have from this initial. But what happens if you can buy another plot of land? You can double your money.
Yep.
You can get 2 weeks now. You can sell 1 week. You can stay for free. It's a brilliant idea.
And because of the tractors, you're able to do things so much faster as well. So what would take, I want to say they said that like with a horse and plow traditionally, someone could realistically, if it was just, a guy and his family doing it, it was way less than 160 acres that you could farm. And of course, you're getting 160 acres because all 160 of it is not perfect farmable area and everything. But when all of a sudden you can now get a tractor, which you can't afford, but you're going to go out and take a loan because it can allow you to take advantage of your whole plot of land. Like you said, you're doing things so much faster and with less work that you're like, why am I not having more land?
So let's go into debt further because this $2 thing is going to hold out for what seems like forever.
Oh, they love killing each other in Europe. This is going to go on for a long time.
Yeah. But that's kind of where this thing started, where the bubble starts to blow up, is you have an initial loan taken out to buy some of this land, to buy these plots. Then you have the money taken out for the tractor, for all your mechanical stuff. You're going to have harvesters, different things like that you're going to need. But the money's good. You're making those payments so easily and having so much left over that you're more than willing to take out another loan that objectively you're not. I mean, you're going to be working twice as hard, but if it's easier than just a horse and plow, why not, right?
We're also sitting 1914 up to 1919 at this point. Last drought that took place was in the 1890s. Most of the people out here have never experienced, or a drought is word of mouth.
Yeah.
It's something that people can remember from years ago, but you've never seen anything like that. For you, it has been nothing but bumper, or, not bumper crops every year, but you've consistently always been able to make money. You haven't had any type of hardship yet. If anything, with being able to, hey, we got a new tractor, it's only getting better for you.
Yeah, so nothing could go really wrong here.
I mean, war could stop.
Yeah.
Peace could happen.
That could happen. If peace is given a chance, it's going to cost you some money. During the war, money was good. You were making a ton of it. Rains were consistent, relatively wet. The average Southern Great Plains precipitation between 50 to 25 inches annually. I don't know what that is in centimeters. I'm going to say it's a lot more. It made for enough water for dry farming to successfully take place. It did well enough, as you were talking about. Word gets back to these big cities. Word gets back to these businessmen, these guys that are looking to make a quick buck. You have the roaring 20s going on, stock market's going like gangbusters. If you want to make even a little more extra money on the side, maybe if the stock market's doing so well, you don't have to keep an eye on it so much. Maybe you go down, maybe you pack your clothes in a briefcase. Oh, this is where I realized a briefcase is called a briefcase because lawyers keep briefs in them.
I believe so.
I had no idea until I was writing this out and I looked at it. I've been watching a lot of Bosch lately too.
I knew that, but The way you just said it to me, I was like, yeah, of course, but I don't know if I'd ever actually thought of that.
I didn't know if it was because of that or you could only pack enough stuff in it for a brief period of time.
Yeah.
Or you keep your underwear in there.
So these guys end up becoming known as suitcase farmers. And the simplest way to explain it is this. You're someone that lives on the East Coast, or you have a little bit of money. You know, you're able to go ahead and buy some of this cheaper land, especially if these homestead acts are, they're still selling it on the cheap. You're seeing all of these people make money. You're hearing about this, and it requires minimal work. In fact, it's so minimal from you. What you do is you jump on that transcontinental railroad, you ride yourself out there toward the Panhandle or any of these areas that we've discussed, hop off the train, you find yourself a plot of land, however many acres you're going to go ahead and get. You go ahead and buy that. You don't build a house. You don't do anything like that.
Huh? Right? Wasn't it renting?
The land?
Or was it purchasing?
They would buy it.
Okay.
And so you would basically buy this land. You weren't having to. I think the rules had kind of probably laxed a little bit because they were just like, yeah, the more fucking wheat we can grow out here, the better.
Yeah. $2 a bushel.
Yep. You're going out, you're buying this piece of land. You then hire somebody who has a tractor and you're like, hey, go ahead and till up all of this land. And I want you, I'll go ahead and pay for the seed and everything and just throw down some wheat on it. And what I'm going to do is apparently this stuff takes care of itself. So I'm jumping back on the train because I only packed enough clothes for 2 days. I'm heading back home and I'll come back in the spring and then I'll hire someone else to go ahead and, harvest it. And then I'll just make my money and I'll do the whole thing again.
Biggest slap in the face to anybody that lives there full time, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Your job is so easy that I can just go ahead and leave. I can come in the fall. I can leave all through the winter. I can come back in the late summertime. I can do your job basically remote.
Yeah.
And still make money.
You're outsourcing all of the stuff that all of these people are just doing for their livelihood, basically.
Yeah, it's just so quick that it happens, and people are making money on this. Mm-hmm. But again, you're using these practices that have gone away from the traditional deep plow. You are very lightly cutting into the surface after you take off this grass, which removes a decent amount of dirt itself as you're plowing up the grass. Mm-hmm. You have no more native water collecting grasses. Farmland ends up doubling between 1910 and 1920. It triples between 1925 and 1930.
Yeah, so 1919, the war stops. There is a period there that all of a sudden, when that happens, whoever's running the, economic division or whatever in Washington looks and says, so all of this money that they've been making off wheat, if this actually goes down, this could cause us a little bit of an issue. So we're going to try to keep the prices up where they are for, a little period of time. Maybe then they can kind of start dialing back operations. So they try for a little bit. I think it's a matter of maybe like 2 years.
1 year. I guess it's 1919 to 1920.
Okay. So 1 year. Yeah. And you'd be like, okay, do they see this coming? Do these people that are living here and farming, do they see it coming? It's going to lower back down. They did actually see it coming. They said, okay, prices are going to go back down. But what we can do is, because we have all this mechanized equipment, we'll just make up the shortfall in quantity.
Yeah.
So you have this thing called the Great Plow Up. So at a time when they're expecting the prices to go down, when logically you would think, hey, let's go ahead and start cutting back a little bit, they're like, no, we'll just go ahead and make up that extra dollar, whatever it was going to come back down to, and we'll just do that because we'll be able to farm all this extra land. 80 plus million acres additional land, like you were saying, are plowed up during this time frame. And that's stuff that, again, it's native grasses. It's stuff that's been there before. And you're basically just churning that stuff up with the expectation that there's going to be no repercussions for it. And you're just planting a fuck ton of wheat.
And maybe this is where the economic math side of it falls short for some of these guys. But after the war is over, demand is going to drop. The price of wheat ends up dropping. I believe it was down between $1 and $1.50.
You were supporting an entire war effort, like over in Europe. Like, where's all that wheat? Like, where do you think it's? Yeah, people are still going to have to buy wheat over there for a little while reconstruction efforts, while Russia, fixes its shit and starts getting its wheat out again. But it's not like they're going to waste time doing that. They need to make money too.
So your idea is to grow more wheat and put more wheat into something that has less demand. So you are increasing the surplus of wheat.
And so are all the neighbors.
Yeah. That's the reason that the price gets so cheap, because you're producing a surplus.
And you have people that are lowering the cost and able to lower the cost because guess what? They have more land than you. So they're able to take.
You have more wheat.
Yeah.
So the more wheat means that it's going to be cheaper because you're trying to get rid of it before it goes bad.
You are. What I'm saying, though, is imagine if someone had 500 acres and someone had the 100 acres. That person that has 500, that it's not quite as much, it's more work, but it's not enough to put them in the red or whatever.
Yeah.
They're able to say, okay, I have this much wheat from these 500 acres. I'm going to sell it at this lower price where I can still make money. The guy with the 100 acres is like, I only have 100 acre worth of wheat. I can't sell it at this price and still make good on it. But all of a sudden now he can't sell it because there's someone offering cheaper wheat.
Yeah, I think it was more they were selling it to the government, and the government just had its direct price for what it could get rid of it for.
Okay, yeah.
So, because they were bringing it to like giant silos and storehouses. Mm-hmm. So, if you think that you have 500 bushels that are going to sell at $1.25,
yeah,
but then you grow 1,000 bushels, and now since there's more on the market, you're selling 1,000 bushels for $1 a bushel because of it. So you're shooting yourself in the foot. Congress ends up stepping in 1919 through 1920. They have something called the Wheat Price Guarantee Act, which basically is, I know we pulled you off the tit a little too fast. Here's a bottle. We're going to appropriate $1 billion to keep wheat prices artificially inflated after the war for a year. As soon as that falls off, as soon as we lose that $1 billion to keep those wheat prices constant, it just drops. The ass falls out of it. There's bushels that are selling for 75 cents a bushel.
There's images of these guys out at night. They were plowing so much land so quickly that they were running these tractors in shifts where people would just come in and drive the tractor and plow. Then they would get off work and the next guy would jump in the seat, and they're running these things through the night. The last 5 years of the 20s, I think it was just during that 5-year period, they said 5,200,000 plus acres were also plowed, which is equivalent to the size of New Hampshire. New Hampshire, not the biggest state, but still the simple fact that you plowed up a state's worth of land during that period.
You're not walking from one end of New Hampshire to the other in any normal, easy amount of time. Mm-hmm. Yet you could walk on farmland for days on end and still not get to the end of it because there's that much farmland. October 24th, 1929. This is going to tie into another episode pretty heavy. This is the beginning of the stock market crash.
Black Tuesday.
This was Black Thursday.
Oh, shit.
So Black Thursday opens 11% lower. The Dow opens 11% lower. We get a Black Tuesday as well.
Oh, we do?
There's Black Thursday. There's a recessionary Friday. And then Black Sunday is the concerns. Black Monday is the drop-off after the weekend. And Black Tuesday is the full crash.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't happen overnight. The Dow opens 11% lower, or the stock market opens 11% lower than the previous day. There's a massive sell-off. There's tons of concern about overvaluations on these stocks, which immediately makes people scared. So they start selling to make sure that they get the maximum amount of money. And that just turns our market completely volatile. There was a point in time on Friday before the weekend where they were trying to shut down the stock market early to just stop people from being able to sell.
Yeah.
That was
stem the bleeding.
The solution wasn't to try to reassure people that things are going to be okay. It's just stop them from having the opportunity to get rid of it.
Yeah, it's going to keep going bad. We just have to stop people from making it worse.
Give them a weekend to think about it.
Yeah.
By the time Monday comes around, cooler heads are going to prevail. Nobody's going to keep doing it.
Nope.
Monday rolls around, takes another just a huge shit. Black Tuesday shows up. It sees the Dow drop to $230.07. It opened that Thursday at 305.85. It dropped more than 25%, and it just blows up the economy. Mm-hmm. And as soon as that happens, we enter the Great Depression. Interestingly enough, though, that's kind of city folk problems, right?
Yeah.
We're not tied to that. I didn't have no money in no stock market. I don't care if it falls.
Yeah, they don't feel it. The farmers aren't feeling it for the first couple of years. In fact, 29 ends up seeing for them like a really good crop. It ends up being a really good crop year. And thinking about this from just when you're short, when you're a poor kid living on your own, everything like that, you do have the stereotypical diet. You're getting the ramen, you're getting the cheap shit and everything. what's going to be cheaper than wheat? You can bake bread, you can feed your family. So all of these people that are also in the cities or in these larger populated areas that are actually being immediately physically hit by the Great Depression, they're starting to cut back, but they can still buy wheat. So the farmers are like, "Oh shit, we had a good year. People are still buying wheat. Nothing can go wrong for us."
Well, October 24th, you're going to be past harvest season. You're going to have sold probably all of your crop by then. So grain prices are next year's problem because you've already sold everything for 29. 30 is going to be when things start to kick in, when you realize that nobody has enough money to buy grain, so the price is going to just drop like crazy. It took the farmers a long time to figure that out. Excuse me. The collapse of the banking sector would kind of be the first thing to hit rural America, where you had people going to try to pull their money out of banks and banks just saying, "Sorry, we're insolvent. We don't have your money."
And then in turn, trying to get that money by going after anybody that has outstanding loans. Whereas in a lot of situations, you would get these farmers that maybe had a year of outstanding loans or something like that, but they were like, they've been making so much money, like they'll bring it back in. They're going to be good for it. Now you're in panic mode at these banks and you're like, call it all in. So, farm commodities end up collapsing, I want to say in like 1930, something like that. And you have all of these people that, because of that, can't pay their loans back. They're getting their farm equipment repossessed. They're getting their houses repossessed. So now you have, just kind of like setting it up for how this is all going to go down. You now have these people that are losing these farms. Some of these places aren't going to then be reoccupied by other farmers and be taken care of. So you have these bare plots of land that aren't being worked, but are basically all fucking plowed because they've been grown wheat on them. And as the wheat prices go down, they go from, I think, $1 down to 70 cents.
So June 1929, the price was $1.22.
Okay.
And it just, we'll talk about the numbers as we go. It's insane how far they end up dropping. They dropped, I believe the lowest price was like 21 cents a bushel. But you didn't have much to sell at that point in time because there just wasn't a demand.
But their solution to this is like more.
Yeah.
We need more. So they're plowing more at this point. They're destroying more of this native area. They're plowing up all this and again, I can't reiterate this enough because it comes into play really big. This is just basically the laziest form of, I'm not trying to,
we're not trying to denigrate a farmer that's a wheat farmer.
No. What I'm saying is, in these people's eyes, wheat was being grown because they had to do the minimal amount of work. They could just churn up the soil a little bit and put it in there. So there's this thing called basically the last plow up. Spoiler alert, there's a reason it's called the last plow up at this point. But this also leads to this huge crop in 1931. So they grow all this wheat. Things are going well as far as like them actually being able to provide the wheat. It's just the cost is killing them because despite this huge crop that they get in 31, there are no buyers and wheat is down to 25 cents a bushel.
In 2 years, you drop from $1.22 to that.
Yeah.
It's just so fast how it just falls off a cliff. And the writing's on the wall. 1930 summer, much drier than usual. Northern plains end up falling into a drought first. So you have everything north of you that's falling into a drought. You have the first recorded dust storms that begin happening September 4th, 1930. And these things are huge. We're going to talk about it. They play such a big part of this. 1931, just like you say, you get this massive amount of crops. You get these tons of bushels. You go to sell them. They say 25 cents a bushel. You're like, no. It's got to be more than that. Like, well, we don't have to pay you. There's 10 other guys in line behind you to bring us the stuff.
Leave it, man. And you have no option.
So then you're saddled with a bunch of wheat. What are you going to do? I mean, I guess you can go home and just start baking loaves of bread and hoping that it happens, but you can't can wheat. Wheat ends up going bad. Like it's a
bread molds. I mean, yeah.
You're going to need to do something with it. 1931, this severe drought ends up starting to creep to the Midwest. It starts creeping into these southern plains after these crops hit. There was a time, I want to say it was in August, one of the Dakotas hit like 121 degrees, which seems insane for the Dakotas. I've never been there. 121 degrees is hot.
Yeah.
That's desert-like temperatures. And everything kind of starts to get a little bit scary.
And I know that we're saying like it kind of probably sounds weird if you're just listening because it's like they had a really good crop in 31, but then a drought hit in 31. So as far as I understand, the growing cycles is a lot of the time they would plant this stuff like in the fall, right before the winter. It was winter wheat, so that way it would be in the ground. You would get the snow going on top of it because it's not going to grow during the winter, but all that moisture, solidifies it into the ground, and then all of a sudden it's got water in the soil. When the spring hits and melts it, it's going to start growing at that point. Wheat grows pretty fast, so you're harvesting sometime probably in the late spring, early summer.
June, July. Yeah.
June, July. And then all of a sudden, you still need water to happen because you need the ground to be able to absorb some of that. So when you plant it the first time, it at least has something because the snow itself isn't going to just be enough.
Yeah.
So when there's a drought, not only is that affecting the actual rain itself, it means you're going to get milder winters. There's not going to be as much snow on the ground come spring to be able to grow stuff.
On all of this massive dry out, these very, very hot days are just soaking all of the moisture out of the dirt. And once that happens and the winds start blowing, you start to see these overplowed, overgrazed lands begin to start causing these things called black dust storms.
So January 21st, 1932, there was and I know some of these figures are just going to sound kind of preposterous, but go look at the images and everything. These things are what you kind of probably see if you're thinking of like a Hollywood picture that takes place in the desert. And it's like, we're going to ride into the dust storm and lose our pursuers or do whatever. Or if you're a fan of The Mummy, all that shit. These dust storms coming through, I think this one was recorded about 10,000 feet tall and moving at 60 miles an hour. And it's black. And during this time period, there becomes an identifying system for where these dust storms are coming from. If they're black, they're coming from like Texas.
If they're black, I believe it is Colorado. If they're red, it's Oklahoma. If they're brown, it's Kansas. I forgot the color of the New Mexico one.
More of a sandy color or something like that.
You could literally tell where these storms were blowing in from by the color of the clouds.
Mm-hmm. So and there were interviews with these, the kids that had grown up during here, and now they're really old and they're giving these interviews. And they're like, I remember, Mama being like, oh, Colorado's visiting us today when they would see these things. Another guy describes this as just, it looks like it's rolling. It looked like it was a tornado on its side that was simply just rolling, and 60 miles an hour. You didn't have a chance to escape it because your car could maybe go, 20.
Yeah, 35, 40 maybe.
At the fastest. So all of a sudden, you just start hunkering down. And you are hoping that this is isolated because this really hasn't happened. You've had winds in this area. They describe the area as like perpetually. There was always at least a little bit of a breeze. But you've never seen anything like this. And it ends up not being an isolated incident because this place called No Man's Land, which No Man's Land is basically... during the Dust Bowl, it's the Oklahoma Panhandle. And maybe a little area.
A little into Texas.
Yeah. So the area that's considered no man's land sees 14 storms in 1932 where visibility was less than a quarter of a mile. So there was so much dust during these storms that they couldn't even see out a quarter of a mile. And that was 14 of these things. So you're sitting there and you're having more than one of these a month. And we're going to reiterate on this a lot, but this isn't just the storm rolling by and, it's dusty and then it all ends up passing through. It's depositing and blowing all the stuff in front of it up against your house, into your house, making it to where your cattle can't breathe.
Yeah. They're suffocating as they're standing out in the fields if you don't get them into the barn fast enough. Mm-hmm. And it's a situation where this isn't like, 6 hours of dust rolls through. Thank heavens we can breathe again. There's dust particles that are staying in the air for days at a time. Mm-hmm. So just because the dust storm is gone doesn't mean there's not a red haze that's hanging out in the air.
It would turn day to night. Yeah. They were talking about like it would all of a sudden. Didn't you say that there was one where it rolled in so quick it turned day to night, and they said it dropped 25 degrees in an hour?
And it was I believe it was Denver that it happened. It's so fast, and there's points in time where if you're outside, you can't even see your hand in front of your face. Mm-hmm. And heaven forbid you go in the house because these weren't super strong structures at this point. This is slat board construction on the outside of it.
Thin panes of glass.
Yeah. So whatever you're doing, if you're inside and you get 60 mile an hour winds against the face of your house, it's blowing those boards apart and just pushing dust inside. Not to mention, you're not as worried about the outside siding of your roof or of your attic. You're not up there. What the hell does that matter?
Yeah.
You get all this dirt that's blowing in between those attic slats and just sitting up there. So now if you have any cuts, slits, openings in your roof, it's starting to pour into your house that way. They said that one of the guys in the Ken Burns documentary said that every time he gets a plate out of a cupboard still, he has to wipe it and clean it off no matter what. All of the silverware, all of the plates, all of the glasses had to be turned upside down.
He said he goes over to the sink and he rinses out the cup. The first thing he does before he even puts any water, he has to rinse it out. But they said there was also different types of storms, not just dust storms or anything, but you would also have sandstorms, which, as you pointed out to me, I was thinking, well, the sandstorm's got to be coming from Texas and from New Mexico and also from like Mexico itself.
Colorado,
But you were also talking about Colorado having sand dunes, all that kind of stuff. Also looking over Nevada, that area coming over there. So the dust storms, they were twofold. So during these sandstorms, these things could peel paint off your car. And if you had to walk outside for any reason, it would pepper and blister your legs. It was like being in a sandblaster.
Yeah, exactly. 60-mile-an-hour winds blowing sand directly at you.
So that's keeping you in the house. You're not leaving at that point. You're just hunkering down and waiting. But then what would happen is, because the sand, it's going to hurt more because it's larger grains. But then the dust storms would roll in. And while they may not have hurt when you actually walked in them, that's the stuff that's going to get into your lungs. That's the stuff you're breathing in. And then just like you said, that's the stuff that's getting through every single crack in your house. They said everything was coated in dust. They would go to sleep. They would wake up covered in dust and they would lift their head up. And the only place that didn't have dust was where their head was laying.
I can't imagine that. I wouldn't have done well because I'm a pretty clean cat. I enjoy my showers. I enjoy being clean. I get dirty plenty, but at the same time, I don't like it. I don't get used to it. The first chance that I have to wash my hands during the day once they get dirty, I'm taking it every time.
There were, we're going to talk about a lot of instances. These aren't one-off scenarios. This is stuff that these people just had to do to survive because, there's not a lot of trees and timber and everything, trying to even burn fires, things like that. There were farmers that were walking around their cattle fields and having their kids just pick up these big buckets of, cow shit that were dried out because they would burn. You get the, not implementation, but basically the invention of what are called Hoovervilles. And this was more kind of an East Coast thing.
Depressionary, larger cities.
Yep, where they would just, people that were evicted from their apartments or whatnot would just go and create these shanty towns. There's one that was built in Central Park. And they did this because Herbert Hoover was fucking up in the White House and wasn't really helping these people out and wasn't doing anything to, as far as they were aware of, to really try to recover or combat the Great Depression.
I haven't run across a good Hoover in history yet.
Nope. I texted you this. I'm starting to really think, too, if I start looking into the vacuum guy, I'm going to be sorely disappointed.
We know probably what he was using the suction power on the vacuum for before he realized
Don't interrupt me while I'm cleaning my room.
Pick stuff up. These things, like you say, 14 reported black blizzards hit in 1932. Dust storms and sandstorms began just rocking these southern Great Plains. And if you are lucky enough to get crops into the ground and begin to grow, what happens when that sandstorm comes through?
It's ripping that shit right out because it's wheat. You don't have to plow that much because it's not going to put down roots that far. We got to talk about this static thing.
Okay.
So these storms would generate static electricity as they were moving in and as they were moving through. Basically, the dust particles in the air, the friction of them rubbing together would create enough static electricity where it would short out cars. It would short out radios.
I don't even know how you can short out a car.
It would be to where I want to say one guy was saying that you could go out and you could get 6 inches from your car door or from something metal, and the arc would come out and meet your hand and it would put you on your ass. There were instances, widely seen instances where I guess it was just a normal thing where because you had the barbed wire fences and everything and all of the static, it would coalesce or move around the barbed wire and conduct it. And it would look like these barbed wire fences were on fire with these blue flames. Imagine seeing that as a kid. Like, what do you think that is? Even as an adult.
Yeah.
Never having ever seen anything, you're just like, the fence is on fire?
If there was one legitimate point in history where I could say people that were talking about the end times might have had an argument, probably the dust
There were
storm.
several instances in that documentary
Yeah.
where like people's grandmas would be like, this is it. Like parents just openly talking about like, oh, it's coming. And there's like small children in the room.
The Redeemer's coming. Everybody be careful. He's going to come in riding on a big dust storm. Hoover, generally just a bad guy, it seems. He believed in the old bootstrap principle of everybody pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. We're not going to give people any aid, which is probably why when...
That's socialism.
Yeah, and that's the kind of shit that he was saying. It's communism. It's socialism. What's known as a Hoover flag is when you can reach into your pocket and you pull your pocket out and there's nothing in there.
That's something else in prison.
Elephant ear?
Yeah.
And then you got the nose. Oh, yeah, I guess your lady holds it for you in prison, right?
No, you hold your... Yeah, your lady holds yours, yes.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where Hoover just kept refusing to help. There were multiple times when there were... things put on Hoover's desk that said, we have a bunch of poor people that can't buy food. We have a bunch of farmers that can't sell their wheat. If we buy the wheat from them and then we give it to the poor people, everybody will be okay. And Hoover's just like, that's not the American way. How are these people going to pay for it? They're not going to pay for it. We're just going to give it to them for free. That doesn't sound right. That's terrible. Interesting thing I heard in soup lines. Apparently you wanted to be the last or towards the back in a soup line because as you would go through, if it had any vegetables or any meat or anything like that, all that stuff sinks to the bottom as they're ladling it out.
Yeah, because they're not scooping all the way down. You're just getting scoops off the top.
So people that were new to these soup lines would think that everybody was the nicest person in the world because they were ushering them to the front, and then they get their bowl of soup and realize that it's just stock and there's no kind of meat or vegetables or anything like that in it.
And the longer that stuff sits in the stock,
cooks better. Yeah. It's just the Great Depression episode is going to be extremely eye-opening. By the end of 32, I guess by June in 32.
Hold on, we got to talk about this insane dust storm in May.
Okay.
So May 1932, there is this dust storm. I believe it started in Montana. So this isn't just specific to what they consider the Dust Bowl, which the Dust Bowl is more kind of it circles around like a large selection, but it doesn't take up the entirety of the Great Plains.
No, but you also had the northern Great Plains falling into drought first. So they're already going to be dry.
Yep. So this storm starting in Montana, it ends up carrying, they said, 350 million tons of dust and particulate and dirt. It moves, and it's moving east. So it's not like it's heading down toward the rest of the Great Plains. It's heading east. It drops 12 million pounds of dust and dirt in Chicago.
Yeah,
they said it
right.
ended up being enough that each person in Chicago could have 4 pounds of dirt.
Of their own.
It keeps going, and it goes all the way off the East Coast to where it's reported that ships 300 miles out off the coast are seeing dust and dirt falling on their decks.
300 miles away from land, and yet there's land that's landing on your ship.
Did you see what some of the solutions were from some of these companies that were trying to say that they could solve this? So a bunch of companies came forward and they're like, this is easily solved. Like, we just need to make sure the dust isn't coming off the planes and doing this stuff. We can actually, why don't we just like cement it? Just put cement over all of the areas that, you know, that all the dust is coming off of. And then another company's like, that's stupid. What we should do is we should do asphalt. Asphalt would be way easier to just like, we can just like spray all of these fields and everything. Yeah, we'll never be able to use them again because we're spraying it with asphalt, but it'll stop people from getting dusty. And then a steel company, I think in Pittsburgh, was like, we need to do wire mesh. We need to put giant pieces of wire mesh over all of these fields, not knowing that this is millions upon millions of acres.
So what you're telling me is an asphalt company pitched the asphalt idea. They were probably going to be the ones to get paid for the contract.
Why don't we just like pour asphalt or concrete over these fields, right?
Do you imagine just the entire Oklahoma panhandle is a big parking lot? Because it's just asphalt.
Look at New York. We don't have any dust. It's because everything is cement.
Yeah, Central Park gets a little dusty. Everything else, though, Great.
I've been saying we should pay Volvo Central Park for years.
Yeah, 1932, 38 cents a bushel. So we did get a little raise from 31 to 32. At the same time, 38 cents a bushel, if you can get anything out of the ground. At one point in time, I want to say it was around 34. I said it was, 40 bushels an acre that they could pull out?
Mm-hmm.
They were pulling out some years 4 bushels an acre.
Yeah.
It's just a massive decrease.
They said there was another storm that rolled through that you're talking about, like the crop damage. Even what they could grow, these storms would pretty much just be like, nope, not yours. There was one storm that came in that blew out a quarter of Oklahoma's crops, half of Kansas's crops, all of Nebraska's crops, and it carried away more dirt twice as much dirt as was dug up during the construction of the Panama Canal.
God damn.
In a fucking storm. In one storm. Like, that's like, how? Like, we did the episode, go back and listen to the Panama Canal episode and you'll get an idea of what that is. But in a storm, these things can be miles tall and so wide that you can't see either side of them, just rolling across states. And all of this drought, dried up land or dirt is just waiting and being like, pick me, pick me.
All of the stuff that you just could have dug deeper and avoided starts getting picked up because of the ease.
Or quit plowing more.
Yeah, or quit plowing more. Exactly. Do you have anything for 33?
No.
I guess we can say build up. You have Hoover, who's extremely unpopular, and you have somebody on the other side of the aisle, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who stood for everything good in this world, it feels like. I'm sure as a president, we're going to get into some stuff that's probably not going to be great. I think he had some time with J. Edgar that was bad.
Stood?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stood tall.
Okay. Technically, yeah, in the beginning.
Everyone, his feet were strapped into boots. FDR gets this groundswell of support. They said that there were areas that would never vote Democrat that ended up switching over to FDR because he was a guy that was talking these new deals. He was going to pick the country up. Everything that Hoover refused to do, FDR wanted to take on. So March 4th, 1933, FDR takes office. He immediately, I believe he closed down the stock market for 2 days. He closed down the banks for 2 days. They rushed this Emergency Banking Act in to kind of stabilize the banking industry, which is great for everybody. May 12th, 1933, the Emergency Farm Mortgage Act takes place. It allots $200 million for refinancing mortgages in the industry, to help the farmers that were facing foreclosure.
Yeah.
So you have him stepping up to say, you're going to need this. If you end up defaulting on these loans, you're hosed. But who's going to come in and buy it? Nobody has any money to buy this to make this work. So if we can keep you on this land and you can keep scraping it out, maybe, just maybe, this desert will go away.
When was the Hoover vacuum invented? Because I want to say that there had to definitely be a slogan of Hoover sucks.
Potentially.
Yeah. And then as soon as the vacuum company, they're like, you mind if we use that?
Well, the rich people, I'm sure, were pretty disappointed because Hoover was trying to help poor people, and that's usually not something they enjoy. After that, Farm Credit is established through that, or the Farm Credit Act is established, and it basically gives local banks that are allowed to set up these credit associations there. So instead of having a bank that may not have a branch in your area or a credit association that holds your note to your land, if you can centralize that and you can have face-to-face meetings with these people, you're able to get a lot more stuff done.
You also can't provide them relief and funding if they can't get to you.
Yeah, exactly. You can't just send them a check in the mail and hope that it gets there. Like, it has to be a face-to-face deal.
Western Unioned it to you.
Yeah, I mean, all of those acts, FDR wasn't a guy that just sat there and spun his wheels. He had to get in and he had to make stuff happen quick. And this is all 1933. June 18th, 1933, the Civilian Conservation Corps is established. It opens all of these soil erosion control camps. The first one was in Clayton County, Alabama. by September, there's 161 of these soil erosion camps. And these are people that are sitting at these plots of land and trying to figure out how to stop this erosion from happening.
Just a group of people staring at the ground and being like, kicking at the dirt a little bit and being like, fuck. Does anybody have any ideas?
You got one guy up in the tower that's telling you when the wind is coming in so you can be out there to watch it.
Sitting out there with buckets of water pouring and being like, it's not taking. Okay, which way is it going? What does this mean?
Water seems to work. Can we get these people water?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's the problem?
There's a drought. Okay, there's a drought. Okay, that's the issue.
Shut up, Larry.
September 13th, 1933, the Soil Conservation Service is founded. And through the efforts of a guy named Hugh Hammond Bennett, they really hit the ground running. He gets the SCS was put in charge of the CCC, the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps. They end up developing the camps to show these farmers these more sustainable practices that these soil erosion control camps have been working on.
So this dude Bennett ends up bringing this guy, Howard Fennell in, who basically goes out there and he's like a fucking dirt whisperer and basically develops these new techniques. And he's like, okay, this is what we're going to do. If we have to farm or if we want to try, because the whole point is not to be like, okay, everyone needs to get out. It's to stop what's going on and it's to try to, in a way, prevent it from happening again, but also reverse there's a whole bunch of things trying to be done here.
Yeah.
But he eventually determines, he's like, okay, so what you need to do is start working. Don't just pick a plot of land and be like, I'm just going to go ahead and plow it north to south. Plow it with the contours of the land. There's a reason that the land has contours is because certain things are windbreaks and they kind of like redirections of. So start, plowing with the land. And you do see that more nowadays, kind of almost a terrace system of farming. The other thing you're going to need to do, deeper furrows, because what will happen is once water does eventually come, it'll be held there in those furrows a little bit more. But at the same time, they serve as these little mini windbreaks of it not being able to just carry off all of the topsoil. It'll carry off some of it, but it's going to really reduce that.
There's just so many kind of no-brainer things. When you have a deeper furrow like that, it keeps the sun off of it longer. So if you can keep the sun off of it longer, it's got less of a chance to dry out. Like you say with the windbreaks, it makes total sense. If you have the contours of a very flat land, any sort of raise you're going to want to try to keep in there because that's going to be a windbreak for literally anything that can happen. Mm-hmm. Crop rotation becomes a real big thing now because you're going to need to cycle through things because everything takes different
like nutrients and minerals from the soil.
Yeah. So if you are rotating those crops, you're giving it the soil a chance to bounce back and kind of reinvigorate for when you do go back to growing wheat or something else.
What soil? Well, there's more down there if you dig deeper.
But that's the thing, was there were areas during these dust storms that they would come out and it would just literally be down to solid ground.
It feels like concrete.
All of the topsoil is completely gone because it just all gets blown off. So it's just like if you have sawdust on a tabletop and you blow it off, you're just down to table as all the sawdust goes away. You can't farm on a table. There's a reason why you run through topsoil is because it's easier to break up. Once you get down too far, you can't use that land anymore. You got any other techniques?
No.
Okay. Let's see where we are. Oh, yeah. I forgot. I looked at this and then I put it away. They developed these camps to show the farmers, like we were talking about. The next thing that happens in September is over the entire month, there is more than 6 million pigs that get slaughtered to try to stabilize pork prices. So you just have to kill off the surplus and you end up not handing it out to the poor people.
Yeah. And this isn't something that's specific like to the Dust Bowl or anything like that.
Great Depression more.
This is more kind of like with the Great Depression, but it kind of also shows you what the country and how ass backwards it is. Because when they slaughter these pigs, it's not like, hey, these are going to stabilize pork prices, so we're going to go ahead and hand this out, because then people wouldn't have to pay for it, which would be so
they would drop pork prices again.
Exactly. But that's what you should be doing, because what was employment? Like unemployment was up to 20% at a certain point during the Great Depression. Instead of trying to like help people out, it's still this thought process of like, well, we're going to have to kill 6 million pigs, but we can't do anything with them because people got to pay for their fucking pork.
Which again, capitalism, it's It's not bad. It works for a lot of people, but
You can't be scared to shy away from it when the situation calls for it.
yeah,
That's why they're,
you have to be able to take care of people.
It doesn't need to be one or the other. Like,
Not
that's
to
the whole
mention,
point.
if 20% of your workforce is out, you're hoping that they get jobs again eventually, right?
Yeah.
So if they starve to death in between then and now, it's going to be hard for them to get a new job.
All right. Well, now that we've discussed the pig killing, let's take a bathroom break. Well, hey there, all you sexy historians. How you guys doing?
It is time for
Socials.
Where can they find us on Instagram?
If they want to follow us, they can find us at Historically High Pod on Instagram.
That goes the same for Threads as well. You can also find us on Twitter.
Tell them about Twitter.
Historically High. That's Historically HI on Twitter.
And if you want to email any of your comments or suggestions, where can they find us at, Adam?
At Historically High Podcast at gmail.com.
Gmail. All right, and back to the show. All right, so jumping forward another year, we come to May 1934, and there's going to be a recurring theme here. It's not just that, this is when the next dust storm hits or anything like that. They're happening all the time. There are just some pretty significant ones.
They just keep getting bigger and bigger, and they start covering more major cities that are outside of the Dust Bowl area. It is becoming a problem within cities just as it is agriculturally. Mm-hmm. And you have a bunch of these people. This is kind of something interesting to think about, too. If you're New York City and you get hit with a dust storm, how can you explain what the plains look like? Because you've never been out there.
Yeah.
Like you don't, this wasn't a time of people taking vacations to the plains. You have no concept that there's hundreds of millions of farming acres that are out there.
Yeah. And at no point are you thinking, it's all an inconvenience for you.
Yeah.
At no point are you probably thinking, I wonder where this came from and if they actually need that. No, you're just like, there's fucking dust everywhere.
Ironically enough, even though this kind of Dust Bowl drought area has taken different directions, it's grown, it's shrunk, it's done all these things. Kind of said the epicenter of this, ironically enough, is Boise City in Oklahoma. That we started out with is this promise of these tree-lined streets and all of this stuff. They think that this is just the center, the eye of the drought.
And it's not like, Adam was saying, it's not localized here. This is kind of the epicenter where the worst of it is happening. But 46 of 48 states, which is crazy. There were 48 states at this point. All right. 46 of the 48 states had experienced drought up to this point. And when it comes to Boise City, they're getting less than that 10% threshold, what classifies something as a desert. Guess what? That area is now a desert because it's getting less than 10 inches of rain.
Worst drought in United States history. The drought area covered more than 75% of the country. Over half the states, 27 states, were in severe drought.
One of the ladies that was given the interview, she's like, it was this period of time where for years we just lived in a brown world. We didn't see any other colors than brown. Like even if something wasn't brown, it would be covered with dust, and so it looked brown. It's hard to even just kind of convey in words like the plight and like what these people were going through. That's one thing that was really actually a good thing about the Ken Burns documentary. Not a good thing that happened, but instead of just looking at facts of how this happened, it broke it down. And also you got to hear of how like people were actually dealing with this. You had, I think they said there was a period that they went into like doctors and stuff like that were having to go in because there were serious health concerns that were happening here. We're going to talk about one here in a little bit called dust pneumonia. Fucking think about it for yourself. But like the kids were, I think on average, 10% underweight for the children and everything. It got to the point where like flour bags that they were buying to go and make bread, which is ironic that they're buying flour, but they're farming.
Producing,
yeah, exactly. Or not producing at this point, actually. But like feed and flour sacks started to have prints put on them, like little flowers and things like that, because they knew so many of these women were actually using these flour sacks to basically tear apart and actually make clothes for their kids. So they were like, well, we'll put some patterns on these bags and everything. So these, little girls that were having dresses made out of them could at least have like flowers on their dress.
It's just a little bit of light and a brown darkness. The funny thing about that one of the ladies who was being interviewed in the documentary said that she showed up to school and another little girl had the exact same dress on because it was from the exact same batch of flower bags that had the same pattern on them. But at that point, you don't care because it's just something different.
You're just fucking hungry all the time and you're sick of being covered in dust everywhere you're walking.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they said that like when they're, kids are still going to school and stuff. And they would show pictures of like parents getting ready to send their kids out to walk to school and they're carrying their lunch pails. They've got goggles on and they have, wet bandanas and fabric over their mouth just to try to filter some of the dust out.
It's impossible to think. And we'll talk about it with the doctors, but there were people that had these coughs when they would go in to see the doctors. The doctors would hold out their flashlight. They would look down their throat. The inside of the throat was just covered in dirt. Can you imagine that feeling of just having dirt stuck all the way down the back of your throat? Yeah, it's the driest. I can't imagine it, yeah. It's the driest that you could ever even to live. And not to mention, once you get past all that dry dirt that's in the back of your throat, it's in the back of your throat because you're breathing it in. So it's traveling down into your lungs and just sitting inside your lungs.
It's drier than my wife hearing me talk about Star Wars.
That might be the driest thing ever. We also have, I wouldn't call it an example, but a possibility within the United States to take a look at, because all of the desert that's in the southwest corner of the United States used to be a savanna. Mm-hmm. And over time, just through the process of weather change, it turned into a giant desert, Death Valley area. That all used to be thriving.
It's crazy to see. So, some of the images that it showed in that documentary where, these dust storms would come in and they would move dust and sand and everything up into these natural stopping points like your house. And it got to the point where some of these houses actually would like start out as like dug-in houses. So like 3/4 of it's underground, 1/4 of it sticks out. Some people live like that. Those ones would almost get buried and people would be constantly trying to dig those out because you had to come and go from your house. The houses that were just normally built, above the ground then resembled those houses where like a half of them was covered with all of this built up sand. You would then get, there's all of this fencing that's dividing all of these different properties and, cattle, things like that. And the sagebrush or the tumbleweeds would come rolling in when these dust storms would bring them, and they would stop on these natural points of these barbed wire fences, but then those would collect the dust. And it would get to the point where you couldn't delineate where like certain property was or where fences even, where you would just see these mounds of dust and you could literally walk over them, which then led to any people still having cattle or livestock would just be able to get out.
Yeah. Yeah. The housing situation is pretty interesting because my grandpa that had the farm, he actually had a basement house to start out with. Mm-hmm. And then as time goes on, that's kind of why you do it, is you build a basement house is basically this is going to be the foundation of your house. And then over time, as you make more money, that's when you can build everything that's above ground.
Also, it probably keeps you a little bit cooler in the summer.
And that's exactly why. You need to start out with that kind of foundation. But at the same time, if you're down below the level of the ground, it's going to stay a lot cooler. It's going to be a lot better. We used to sleep in there all the time. And my dad my dad, his brother lived with my grandpa in that house, and it was 2 rooms. There was 1 bathroom. Everything was below there. And I had no concept that was just how they lived because I had only seen the top and bottom part of the house.
Yeah.
And so every time he'd talk about my room, it would be down in the basement. So we'd run down there and play, and that's where we would stay. And I would always ask him why his room was in the basement. Like if he chose that, he's like, we didn't choose where our rooms were.
Yeah.
These were the only 2 rooms that we had. Me and your uncle slept in this room, and Grandpa slept in the other room, and that's all we had.
Yeah.
And then I moved out, and he's like, eventually I came back after college. The whole top part of it was Grandpa moved into the top part. Me and your uncle had to stay in those bottom 2 rooms.
Well, what's crazy too is, and I'm still waiting on confirmation from certain family members to get back to me, but I was doing it didn't even occur to me. So my grandpa's from Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And was born in 27. I don't know when he moved, but he moved to California. We're going to talk about something that happens here that makes this kind of make sense. But I'm wondering, he was in southern Oklahoma, kind of closer to like the Texas border, but this encompassed such a huge area. I'm really curious to know if he left kind of in the 30s or like in the, going into the 40s because of this.
It's amazing, this mass migration that we're going to talk about. June 28th, 1934, the Taylor Grazing Act allows the government to start taking up to 140 million acres of this federally owned land out of the public domain. So it's not necessarily kicking farmers off their land, but anybody that's defaulted, anybody that's abandoned or anything like that, they're able to start coming in and snatching up this land so it's not being sold again. This is hopefully to just slow the damage of this overused land. Now, I'd imagine a lot of people abandoned the land because they didn't have any topsoil left to grow anything on.
Yeah.
Also, if you get a big windrow of dust that piles up near your house and you have just a barren stretch of an acre, do you just take that out there and dump it back on the land and hope that it's still...
It's probably sand and shit.
Yeah, I guess it's true. But it's just... What do you do with all this dirt that keeps piling up on your properties?
You probably try to put it in that personal garden that a whole bunch of people tried to have. I would imagine that's what you'd have to do with it.
Yeah, the issue with that, though, is just because you can't get wheat to grow, you're going to try to plant something that's going to be able to sustain your family because you got to eat something beyond wheat. All of a sudden, the exact same issues are going on. They're planting... or they're basically cutting out the bottom of a tin can. They're setting it up to try to create a windbreak for any sort of vegetables that they're trying to grow in the gardens.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Unfortunately, when the wind blows in, it fills all of your cans up, and then it just smothers whatever plants you have, or it's so hot that it basically just cooks whatever sprout you have growing up.
Yeah.
So they can't even get their own fresh vegetables to grow. December 1934, these numbers, they blow me away. By then, they had basically counted out, I guess, I don't know how you would even get to this, approximately 35 million acres of formerly cultivated land was essentially destroyed for any sort of future crop production. That much, 35 million acres just taken off the board.
Which means that that's probably, and again, that is land that had already been farmed.
Yep.
That's 35 million of it that you could probably walk out on and it'd be like a parking lot.
Completely flat, completely solid. Nothing's going to grow there. 100 million acres have lost all or most of their topsoil. So, that's just the parking lot. 125 million acres of planted land that was rapidly losing topsoil. So stuff that had seeds in it was just rapidly declining.
By 1935, so the 100 million acres, that is 850 million tons of topsoil were taken off the Great Plains by 1935.
It's the numbers are just unfathomable. It's crazy.
The weight of that, 850 million tons of dirt were taken off of a quarter of the country.
And then deposited in other parts of the country.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you...
I don't know. It's one of those numbers that, like, even if you say it, it's unfathomable.
Yeah. And again, to go back to Chicago and the 4 pounds of dust or 4 pounds of dirt that could have been allotted to everybody else, how do you get that out of your city and where do you take it?
Yeah.
Do you just, everybody shovels it out into the street and then they scoop it up, but then you just go drop it outside
Shawshank style.
town?
You got to carry it in your pocket or like in your pant leg, and then you got to walk out
every day.
Everyone's got to walk out. That's actually how they established like the Chicago shoreline to extend it out. Everyone just had to go out toward Lake Michigan or wherever and just like deposit all their dirt.
And it's like you're digging out of a snowstorm. You're digging out your car and just throwing it on your neighbors that's not out there doing it already.
Yeah.
Just so much topsoil being lost. January 15th, 1935, the government formed something called the Drought Relief Service. And it's basically to coordinate all of these relief activities. The DRS does some pretty crazy things to try to stabilize the beef market. They buy cattle for this emergency designated Wow. Let me try that sentence again. The DRS bought cattle for that's the one I was missing. I missed the M. From emergency designated county areas. So if you have a bunch of cattle out there, you're probably not going to be doing a lot with them. Not to mention they're costing you money because if you don't have any natural grass or anything like that for them to feed on, you're buying feed for these cattle.
Which means that you're keeping them alive to starve.
Yep.
And that's all of the images you see. These are, very rarely does someone have I guess what you can consider like a usable herd of cattle. It's just a bunch of fucking emaciated cows that are out in these fields.
Yeah.
Walking around the dead ones that are already laying down and half buried in dirt.
Hey, you're not pulling that thing off the field. You're probably going out and maybe trying to bury it with some of the extra dirt that you got.
Mm-hmm.
They were paying $14 to $20 a head for any sort of fit cattle that could be turned into beef, canned beef. The unfit heads would fetch at minimum $1 a head. That was actually more than 50% of the cattle that they had that came in. So you're yielding less than 50% of usable cattle, and you have more than 50% that you have to do something with.
Well, if I'm a emergency management manager, I guess, I'm going to dig a big old hole, big old trench, and I'm going to herd all the cattle into that. And then I'm going to have a bunch of guys with rifles on each side of the pit. And as all these cattle go in here, I'm just going to have them start firing because that's like the logical thing you would do, right? That's not just a crazy thought that came out of my mouth.
Yeah, I mean,
it is what they did.
It has to be, right? And this wasn't an area. Kids got to come. Kids got to come to this cattle sell-off without the parents understanding that there was a backhoe over there that was digging a big hole. Mm-hmm. They didn't know what that was for. They didn't know why the line of emaciated cattle were headed that way. And then they all kind of found out at once.
Yeah.
And again, you learn a lot of hard lessons on these southern Great Plains. But to have to be a witness to them just mass murdering cattle in a big hole and then just dirting over the top of it.
That has to be one of those weird things that not very many people saw, but enough people that it was like how does that affect so many people? Because this wasn't just a thing where it was just this happened at one cattle ranch. Mm-hmm. This was all over the Great Plains in the Dust Bowl. So at a certain point when, people would meet other people and be that were kids at the time and be like, oh my God, you were in the Dust Bowl? Be like, did you guys have cows? And they're like, we had cows. What did they do to your cows? They dug a big hole and they're and then they shot them all in it. And they're like, oh my God, it happened to you too.
Us too. Yeah, that's some real trauma bonding that would have to happen in that environment. So you get all this usable cattle, all this usable beef that ends up going into cans that then does end up into these relief activities. Mm-hmm. So finally, FDR has looked at this and said, hey, there's a solution here. We have to feed these people. And we're only going to have people come into emergency services that I've set up so we can just give it to them there. That's going to fit for everybody. You need more food than that, though, right?
Yeah, you can't just live on beef.
No, you might have to have some other meats.
Despite certain podcasts espousing the proponents of an all-meat diet, I think you got to mix it up just a little bit.
Well, you got to mix up your meat sources, too, because cow is always going to be a slow meat. It's a slow-moving meat, really easy to shoot, probably, something that you can come by pretty easily. Not for them. Jackrabbit is a very, very hard meat to catch. Very quick, very agile. You're shooting them out in the field. We've all seen how bad of luck Elmer Fudd has. Mm-hmm. He just can't shoot a rabbit to save his entire life. Unless you were to, I don't know, organize these things in your areas, in your counties, where you would have all the people come out and form a line, and they would, walk in and then you'd start to bring in the flanks a little bit toward, I don't know, a pen or a fence where you're chasing hundreds of these jackrabbits into I don't know, an arena type area filled with townsfolk with clubs. I mean, kids, if they want to get in on it, and then just beat the shit out of these rabbits. It's a visual that will not leave your brain. If there was one section of that Ken Burns documentary that I could have lived without, it was watching the dad.
It's watching Charlie Rat Bash
down
in the basement, except it's actually worse because you the kids would talk about like the screams of the rabbits, and rabbits do scream.
Yes.
Like that's known. And so, and they're fast as shit. So you're literally having all of these people in this big pen that all these rabbits have been brought into. They're jumping around. You're hitting them. You're not hitting them in the head every single swing. You're breaking their backs. They're screaming. There's a guy that's literally holding them up by the back legs and just smacking them in the back of the head like a damn assembly line.
Like, yeah, it's like he's beating the dust out of a carpet.
Yeah.
Just trying to get these things killed. And this was a kid-friendly event. As soon as I saw the video of what was going on, I immediately had that visualization in my head. Like, when you take really little kids to an Easter egg hunt?
Yeah.
And they usually start out on a line and their parents are holding their hands and they drag them out. That's what it kind of felt like, except for instead of Easter eggs, they were busting open rabbits.
One of the guys was like, I had my fill after one of these rabbit hunts. And this wasn't, again, this isn't an isolated thing where we're like, oh, this happened one time. No, this happened all over the place multiple times. Any times that these rabbits that would come in and basically destroy any of the food that they were trying to grow in these gardens and everything, this was a common occurrence of these, basically these bunny bashes.
Yeah, we're painting these rabbits as invaders. Well, when a dust storm happens and rabbits live underground and you get all this dust blowing in, it ends up filling up their homes. And it ends up covering all their food.
Everyone's getting displaced.
Yeah, so naturally these jackrabbits have to move onto these farmlands because that's where any sort of sprout or anything like that that the people are trying to grow and trying to save their own lives, the rabbits have to eat.
It's and it's their animals. It's a survival thing. They're like, yes, I will probably get my head bashed in. I've heard the rounds of talk have made their way around the rabbit community. They're talking about these weird like drives that these people are doing, but I got to eat.
Yeah, it's a real circle of life type situation that I'm sure was not too fun to watch. People weren't too fond of going to these things.
They're definitely eating these rabbits, right?
Yeah, you have to.
Okay.
At the same time, those rabbits are only going to be good in the heat of summer for so long, so you're making rabbit jerky. Like, the electricity is pretty spotty out there unless there's a storm and there's a bunch of static electricity.
That's when you hang all the rabbits on the fence in hopes that the blue flames cook your rabbits for you. You got to laugh, you're going to cry in this. I know a lot of this is morbid and everything, and these people suffered we can't even comprehend it. But some of this stuff, what they were forced to have to go through, it's almost like, it's almost fiction.
Yeah, I'd have been out so fast. So fast. April 8th, 1935, FDR approves the Emergency Relief Appropriation Act. This provided a $525 million for drought relief and for authorization of these Works Progress Progress Administration, which ends up employing 8.5 million people over the Great Depression.
WPA did a ton of good work. They brought in relief efforts. There was a point in time where, and this is just the statistics of one town, that they vary depending on the area, but 80% of people within this one town relied on these relief services. This is also at a time when pride is a really big thing, and it's still a really big thing. I'm not saying that, but you would have these farmers that this was their first bit of land that they got. They weren't willing to give up on it. But at the same time, you get this fucking shit drilled in your head during the Hoover administration and all this pick yourself up by the bootstraps bullshit. You don't have fucking bootstraps because you boiled the leather to try to fucking feed your family. Yep. So you would have people holding out on these relief services when there was nothing would come of it. Like, what am I trying to say? There was no disadvantage of you were saving your family and saving your children. And there were still people holding out because they felt like it was a handout. I don't get that. As someone that has a kid, like, there's nothing like I wouldn't do for my kid, but to be like, no, I'm not going to accept these relief efforts for this food and everything because I couldn't support my family on my own. Motherfucker, it's nature. It's a drought. Like, there's nothing you can do about it. Take the goddamn canned ham and the grapefruits and go back to your family.
Well, it's also kind of a horseshoe theory because you don't want to take a handout because of your pride, but shouldn't your pride come from being able to provide for your family?
Yeah. So by any means necessary.
Yeah. I mean, you got to do what you got to do. And there's a lot of these guys that had to swallow that pride, but did step up. And the Works Progress Administration did so much for these communities. You had them out building high schools, out building roads, just anything that you could do to get these people working and going. Not to mention, anytime somebody comes into office, anytime a president comes into office, what's the first thing they do? Start trying to create jobs. That's just what somebody does. You create all of these new programs to try to put people to work.
You're trying to solve one technically worldwide crisis, but also a national crisis with the Great Depression in these more populous areas by creating the jobs to handle the other fucking catastrophe that's going on in the other part of the country. I mean, you're trying to make the best of the situation, but it's just an insane series of events being like, well, we only have these jobs to create because there's a fucking ecological disaster going on that's covering everything with dust and killing people. So we're going to take the people that are out of work because of this Great Depression and send them to the Dust Bowl to help out.
In hopes that they then spend the money that we give them to stimulate the economy to drag us out of the Depression.
But don't buy land out there because we're taking up all the land for good reason as well. The Civilian Conservation Corps was created. I'm not sure exactly when, but it was around this time in 1935.
1933. That was June 18th.
Oh, that was okay.
Yep.
So they're basically brought in, and one of their, goals or one of their missions, I guess, is to basically try to kind of stabilize also the wind and the dust storms in the Great Plains. Well, how do you do that? Well, we're going to plant a bunch of trees. So by 1940, they had actually planted like 18,600 miles of like break. So basically like between brush and trees and everything, it ended up equating out to 217 million trees.
Yeah. We'll talk about it. I thought it happened in 37, didn't it?
It was up to 1937. Okay. Between that time, by 1940, they had planted that many. At the same time, are you just throwing spaghetti at a wall at this point and hoping that it sticks? Because those trees, some of them did, you harvested for timber. You're trying to replant that kind of stuff. But also, who's determining where this is going? Are you just like, okay, I say we just draw a line down the middle of the Great Plains and we just plant a fuck ton of trees from the Canadian border all the way down to the tip of Texas and go.
Buddy, that was what the plan was. Initially, it was going to cost $75 million and take 12 years. They were going to plant a 100-mile wide strip of trees from Canada all the way down to North Texas. Can you imagine what our country would look like if we had a strip of 100-mile wide trees going from
be kind of cool, actually,
to Texas?
Be kind of cool.
Yeah, and this was all just for a windbreak. This was like, hey, we have to figure out how to get this wind off the Great Plains. If we can build this, it's going to be great. But just to have this man-made forest in the middle of our country, like just a straight line basically through it that you drive through, that would be crazy.
I know.
And plus, if you protect it, and it's all old, not necessarily old growth at this point, but if you do it in the 30s, we're talking 2025 now. Those trees are almost 100 years old. That's a big forest.
That would be something nowadays, had that actually been like successful and everything. That would be something that would be some type of like well-known dividing line in the middle of the country. Like, how far did you make it? Have you made it past the forest yet?
Yeah, it'd be Roosevelt Forest.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
The largest national forest in the country, probably.
Yep. It would have the best handicapped access that you could have in any forest, for sure. Go down any path in a chair.
Every tree will have a ramp.
We're finally to it. We're to the big day, April 14th, 1935, known as Black Sunday. Black Sunday has absolutely nothing to do with Black Thursday, nothing to do with Black Friday, nothing to do with Black Tuesday.
It's more appropriate, though, because it actually gets its name from the worst black blizzard that occurred. So this is what they call these giant rolling black storms. They're called black blizzards. This was, up to that point, I think the worst one, or was it the worst overall?
I think it was the worst overall.
Is this the one that actually carries it took a few days, but this is the one that ended up covering Washington, D.C. in a fine layer of black dust?
I think it was a different one that happened that soon, or that close to it, because this, I believe, was coming north to south.
Okay.
Which
I can't keep my blizzard straight,
yeah,
man.
There's so many that happen. We'll talk about how the numbers jump. But this storm carried 300,000 tons of topsoil that it lifts in the air. It spanned all the way from central Nebraska to the border to the border with Mexico. So it starts central Nebraska, ends up all the way down at the border. So through Texas completely to get down there.
I mean, it didn't stop at the border. It kept going. That's just where it was like, the dust isn't ours anymore.
Eventually it has to lost a little bit of steam. It's so wide. It goes from Pueblo, Colorado to eastern Kansas. That's how one storm. That's how wide that is. I believe it was over a mile in the air, mile tall.
That's fucking terrifying. The visual of that, no escape anywhere.
Yeah, there was one guy that was talking about it, and he said that as they were driving back, and the shittiest part about Black Sunday is the beginning of the day started off like picturesque.
They said that was like not uncommon either.
That it was nice before it got bad.
Just a calm before this, yeah.
But people were outside. They were celebrating. They were going and taking picnics out in
20 miles from their house.
Yeah. You're leaving all your doors open. They said that one of the biggest morale boosters for these people, because it was so dirty so much of the time, was to go in and be able to clean their houses and to sweep out all the dust and to wash the curtains, to just try to make this place clean again, because it was so dirty all the time that it was just pointless to try to keep up on it. There were multiple parts of that documentary where they talked about just the mental anguish of a mother who just can't keep the dirt out of her house. Mm-hmm. I totally understand it.
Out of her kids.
Yeah. And that's why, because any dust that's in the house is going to end up being inhaled by the kids eventually. 800 miles in length was how far this thing went. Between 300 and 500 miles in width. It blocked out the sun completely.
So that depth, the length of time, the reason that's so crazy is, yeah, you're not going anywhere. It's 800 miles. You have nowhere to go. But the 300 to 500 miles in depth means that once it hits, you're in that for a very long time.
It said that by the time the dust hit the city and by the time the winds pushed most of it out, it was about 10 hours long, like midday.
And what's crazy is you do the calculation on that and you're like, well, how long would it take 500 miles of storm to pass you? This is when you get into that area of like 50 and 60 mile per hour winds.
Yeah. It's moving very, very fast.
No one has ever. What's crazy, you know what 60 miles per hour feels like because you've stuck your hand out the window at 60 miles an hour. It's pretty fucking fast. No one had ever experienced, I mean, up until like this point, a lot of these people didn't know what 60 miles per hour of wind felt like, and they're getting hit with it standing flat-footed.
Well, I think it was in Boise City. They had 2 funerals that day, and also I think it was like Palm Sunday or some goofy Easter shit like that. They had 2 funerals, and it was for a grandma and it was for a child. They were taking the grandma back to wherever she came from before the Dust Bowl. It was somewhere in Oklahoma. The daughter was going to be buried within the city, but the issue in Boise City was the cemetery was so full of dirt that they couldn't dig down to find a plot.
You couldn't see tombstones. You'd just be, how many holes would you have to dig? And you're like, this one's already taken. Seat's taken. And so, yeah, you just have to go out to where you're absolutely sure that there's not going to be anything else out there. And I think during this time, too, there was a family that because it was like the first nice day, like they had seen like this in a long time, like, let's go out to, there might have been a reservoir or something like that. It wasn't close to them. I think it was 20 miles away. Let's go out there and let's like have a picnic and everything. So the family jumps in their car that goes 15 miles an hour, maybe 20 miles an hour, and heads out there. This thing ends up rolling in like out of nowhere. I mean, of course, you can see a storm coming a long ways off, but still, regardless of the flatland, you only have a certain distance that you can see. If it's going 50 or 60 miles an hour, regardless how far away you see it, even if you see it at the very furthest away point, which I'm sure at this point in time, these people were pretty good at spotting a storm, there's nothing you can do. You just got to get in your car and hope that you can get back home at some point.
And then when it hits, you can't. When it hits, you have to just hunker down. We didn't even talk about what they did to drive cars in these storms, right? The static electricity with the chains.
So they had to take chains and basically attach them to the cars. And then once these storms would hit, they'd have to throw these chains out like the car door and have it dragging on the ground to simply provide a ground to where these things wouldn't short out. The situation where the girl was being buried outside of town, there was a pretty decent like procession for the funeral. And as they're trying to basically finish up this funeral, the dust storm rolls in, people are getting in their cars, but visibility is so bad that 6 guys have to get out of the cars and walk in front of like some type of weird ass fucking pallbearers for this entire convoy of people in their cars and walk them back down the road and into town. And 10 hours it took.
Yeah.
Because
they had to go back to Boise City.
Because they're only moving at the pace that these guys already getting blistered in the face and everything with the dust storm. And they're just the car is just staying right behind them. And then that car is staying behind the next one, just so someone doesn't get lost. There were instances where kids would go out into the dust storm and they wouldn't find them days later, and they would be buried and suffocated in sand. There was, one of the fucking hardest parts to listen to of that documentary, they were talking about this woman who had given birth to twins. And because the dust was so bad, within, I think, a week, was it 2 weeks? A week to 2 weeks.
I think it was like a week.
The babies had died from, dust inhalation, everything. There was a thing called dust pneumonia that was a thing created just in the Dust Bowl itself, where you would get sick because your fucking lungs would be basically coated and choked. You would be almost drowning in dirt the same way that water could drown you, and that you would have particulates and stuff. And when these kids died, they were talking about how they had someone make a casket, but then someone went to like the store and bought 2 size 12 shoe boxes. That's how little they were. Put them in the shoe boxes, put the shoe boxes in the casket, and then buried them.
It's just... And you grieve that loss. It's an awful loss. At the same time, there's another storm rolling in that you have to live through. Like,
and you have 5 or 6 other kids.
Yeah. Yeah. A fuzz lighter story from the Black Sunday after that. There was a dad that they must have been out. I think they might have been at the funeral. He had a niece that was with him, and the niece saw the storm, ended up heading back to the house. Uncle, aunt, that family wasn't there, so she decides to head back to her house. Well, as the family gets home, they thought that the niece is going to be at the house. She's not there. Storm blows in. It's not like you can just make a call in a dust storm. It's not like...
You can't make a call when it's nice outside.
Yeah, exactly. So this uncle, grabs a flashlight, goes out. He's braving the storm, and he has to get on the dirt, on the ground, and just belly crawl all the way underneath this dust over to his brother's house to make sure that his niece got back over there. Once he gets there, he realizes the niece is okay, everything's fine with her. Instead of staying there, he knows that he has to get back to check on his own family and make sure that everything's good. Gets belly to the dirt again, army crawls all the way back down the road. They said it was a matter of like 5 blocks, I think, that this dude had to crawl on his stomach to try to... He was laying on the ground. He was laying on the dust in order to protect himself from being pushed over and breathing in the dust that was floating through the air. Like, just the sacrifices that these people made to make sure that people were good are so crazy.
Even the weirdest aspect of thinking, like, these people have probably been putting up with this for a while. The family, the adults in the family have been sacrificing, trying to keep their kids alive. These guys are not heavy guys. They're not built guys. They're used to like hard farm work and everything. They're skinny. Doesn't take a strong wind to throw that guy off course, throw him and he's hurt. Then he can't get out of that thing or get lost.
Yeah. Get buried, step in a dust drift. Along with dust pneumonia, there was something else that they would get. So dust pneumonia would end up in 3 ways. You either get better, hopefully, or you would die, which was a bad thing, or it could turn into tuberculosis. When it turns into tuberculosis, you're pretty much on a pitch clock at that point in time. The other thing that they could get was something called silicosis. And the only other place in the United States that silicosis had been found was in mining towns and miners that had spent decades underneath the earth breathing in this silica that was then going in and cutting up their lungs. They were finding cases of people that lived in the Dust Bowl that had never gone underground to mine in a matter of years. So what would take decades of mining to give you this silicosis was taking a matter of years above the surface in the Dust Bowl because there was so much dust that was being breathed in. Massive amounts.
Like, I wonder what the long-term, like, effects of that are. Or if your body eventually, if you get into an area where you're not having to do that, eventually just heals itself.
Well, that was a shocking thing about the documentary was they were interviewing a ton of people that were still very old. The documentary was done, I think, in 2012.
I don't know if you consider that a ton. I mean, there was probably interviews with, what, 10 people max?
Yeah, but I would think that average age for somebody that lived through breathing in that much dust is 60s.
Yeah, maybe.
It's a long run for those people. They saw a whole lot. Not to mention, right after that, they had to go through World War II. So things didn't get better for a while. The nation, Congress, starts to take a look at this as maybe something bad going on. April 27th, 1935. The Soil Conservation Service is in front of Congress under the direction of Hugh Bennett. Hugh Bennett is up there basically trying to stall. And Hugh Bennett needs something pretty magical to happen while he's talking to Congress and while he's doing this congressional hearing. So he starts telling stories about his youth and growing up on a cattle farm and just trying to stretch the time. He's trying to stretch the time. He needs a little bit more to go. All of a sudden, one of his aides is looking out the window, gets his attention, and gives him the thumbs up. He gives him the thumbs up because Hugh Bennett knew through talking to these national weather stations that there was a massive dust storm that was headed directly towards Washington, D.C. And Hugh Bennett wanted to really drive home his point for this soil conservation effort that needed national attention by letting these guys actually experience what's going on. So as Hugh is up there giving his congressional hearing, he gets the thumbs up. He says, this is what everybody is going to have to deal with if we don't take this seriously. One of the senators looks out the window and he goes, that's not a normal rainstorm. What is that? And he goes, it's a dust storm. It's a black dust storm. And Washington, D.C. proceeds to get hit with this dust storm that Hugh Bennett had his fingers crossed was going to make it all the way to D.C.
There's got to be a cry of witchcraft at that point. Like, how are you doing this?
It ends up hitting the building, and it ends up just starting to fill everything inside this building that they're in with dust. Everybody starts coughing. They look outside. It's just dust, snow that covered everything. They had inches of dust just everywhere in Washington, D.C.
Lincoln Monument covered with a nice fine layer of dust. I want to say it was Hugh Bennett. So he had a speech that he had made that it's a little bit longer than this, but this is the part that really stands out. He says, we Americans have been the greatest destroyers of land of any race or people, barbaric or civilized.
Yeah, I got some arguments for that. There's a few other guys that I can think of. Maybe that didn't scar the land as much up to that point, but...
Well, I mean, he doesn't have to be talking about just the dust storm. He could have been talking about the entire encompassing of, like, destroying the land.
Yeah, and then the bison before that. A few other things that they had done. But either way, drives it home. Congress declares soil erosion a national menace. This live demonstration that they got really made sure that they were going to do something about this. And after that, the SCS develops these programs to retain topsoil and prevent this irreparable damage that's going on to the land. The next move with this act is they start to pay the farmers to implement these soil conserving farming techniques.
Listen, we sent Howard out there to figure this shit out, and I can't believe we're going to have to actually pay you guys to try to save this area, but here's some money. Start doing what Howard Fennell says.
Yeah, and all of this stuff is happening so close to the time that Black Sunday happened, but it really didn't matter. Black Sunday broke so many people that this mass exodus starts leaving from Oklahoma and heading west. They're looking for any jobs that they can find. And this isn't a moving truck situation. This is a truck where your farm vehicle, whatever vehicle you have, is being piled with the bare necessities.
This is quite literally it's Beverly Hillbillies rolling into California style. This is people loading up whatever they can actually load up into these little trucks or cars. They're modifying, some of these families are modifying these work trucks as like covered wagon type, like food trucks that they can use because, again, it's not going to be a quick journey. You're traveling from Oklahoma or all these areas and you're heading to California, which means you're still not out of it. You're traveling through New Mexico and Arizona and Nevada and all that kind of stuff. And you're piling your chairs and your table in the back of your truck, and then you're throwing a mattress down, and then you're setting your kids on the mattress with their legs hanging off the tailgate. And then you just, and you just head off down the road trying to figure shit out.
Well, and history is so cyclical because 100 years before this, 80 years before this, Manifest Destiny kicks off, and you're seeing these covered wagons go west. Mm-hmm. And now the only difference, go west for a new, better life.
Yeah.
And now you're just seeing the same thing happening, except for the wagons have motors in them.
Yeah.
Like it's the exact same thing that's going on. It's just a little bit more mechanized. And imagine, if you will, with us, you're in the panhandle of Oklahoma. The geography thing caught me again. I completely forgot that Oklahoma touches Colorado. Mm-hmm. Like that doesn't make sense in my mind because Oklahoma's East Coast, Colorado's Midwest. Mm-hmm. It doesn't compute for me. But you leave through the panhandle. Potentially you're driving through parts of the Texas panhandle. Then you're driving through New Mexico. Then you're driving through Arizona or Nevada, two historically very hot desertish places.
Still gaining elevation.
Yep.
You're going up.
So your vehicle's moving much slower. Mm-hmm. You're trying to figure out how to make sure to keep all 7 of your kids on the back of this vehicle that's traveling down a road that's not well maintained.
You're also stopping every night to set up camp on the side of the road. Or, I mean, there's images during this exodus of like, there's billboards that people are setting up their little like camps behind and everything, just trying to like get some shade during these basically these journeys to go out west. And it's not like they are being welcomed. Again, this is during the Great Depression. It's hitting everywhere. It's hitting on the West, or, the West Coast as well. And you get situations where people are taking it upon themselves to basically try to close these other states off to these people trying to basically kind of flee for their lives, basically. And there's a situation in February 1936 when the chief of the LAPD, I believe his name was James Davis, sent 125 police officers on border patrol to Arizona, Nevada, and Oregon to basically keep what they considered these undesirables out.
It's absolutely disgusting. No matter where you came from, and that's the interesting thing about what's going on, is this mass exodus that's coming out of the Great Plains isn't just solitary. This is a national movement towards California, because before the Depression happened, California needed people. It had such a booming industry out there that they wanted people to come to California. The Depression hits, all of a sudden the unemployment rate skyrockets, but then you have all of these people that are still moving towards California and coming in, and you have situations where there's strikes that are happening out in these agricultural areas. And while these people are on strike for low wages, you have these people that are coming into town that are willing to work for pennies because it's still more money than they had trying to work the land in the Great Plains.
Yeah.
No matter where you came from when you were coming east, they just called you an Okie. That was the colloquialism that they used. You were just some dumb Okie that couldn't make it on your land, so you're invading the areas to come in there.
And you have these people that have, these farming operations that are just like, oh, shit, cheap labor. And they're taking advantage of these situations and basically kind of stepping on the heads of these people that are already drowning just because they can at that point. So, and again, these are Americans too. So it's not like saying, oh, well, Oklahoma is a state at this point. You're all part of one country.
Yeah, there were olive farms that would pay workers $7 a day, which equivalates out to, I think, about $42 today. Their time worked was 16-hour days. Yeah. They were making $7 a day, working 16-hour days, which is still less, it's still less than all of the people that are on strike. Mm-hmm. You have these scabs showing up in the eyes of these workers, and all of a sudden there becomes just violent pockets at some of these farms because of the anger that's going on. And that's after you get past this asshole that put up this blockade on the borders, where if you were coming in and you didn't have, I believe it was like $150 that you could show the policeman, or like an intent to work letter, like somebody sent you that there's a job waiting for you, they would arrest you or make you turn around. And when they would arrest you, they would charge you with some kind of invasion or something like that. And then they would sentence you to hard labor. So you're serving your sentence for trying to come better your families through hard labor, or they're just making you turn around and go home.
And separating you from your family if they're doing that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank heavens the ACLU steps in. They sue the city for corruption and a couple other charges and win. Davis ends up having to pull the policeman off. But again, you're pulling the cork out of a situation that the bottle's just dumping out into California. And the U.S. has to move to create these camps for all of these, you can call them refugees at this point. No, honestly, migrants.
They're refugee camps.
But the issue is these, I think there were 3 or 4 migrant camps that they built. Each one of these camps held like 300 people, 300 families, whatever you want to call it. And there were tens of thousands of people pouring into California. So you start to get these camps that are being built along the freeway or along the highways, along the streets in towns. You have San Francisco that's flooded out. You have Los Angeles, who's it's crazy to think now because they're so multicultural and they're so accepting of everybody else that there was a point in time when they're just like, we can't have this.
Well, and then you get the collection, just like anybody moving into an area where it's unfamiliar to them, they all tend to congregate.
Yeah.
So you get the building of what were kind of like how we were seeing the Hoovervilles and everything that were built over like in New York and on the East Coast. You start to get these little Okies or little Oklahomas that are being built that are basically just these little shanty towns that are full of the people that are, fleeing the Dust Bowl.
And it's all just a hope that your life has to be better than what it was back on the dust farm.
It doesn't feel like it could probably get any worse.
No. So you got to take these chances. You're putting all your money into getting out there, or wherever your car breaks down or your money runs out, that's kind of where you just have to start your life over.
Yeah, you have to have enough money to get the gas to even make that trip, which is a long trip.
And how do you know fuel mileage at that point in time?
Yeah.
You just go until it's empty. One of the families that came over was telling a story that the oldest brother was the one that was driving the family over. And it was the younger brother telling the story, one of the younger brothers. And he said that his older brother was so paranoid about running out of gas that every gas station they hit, he would stop and top it off.
Kind of have to, though, because honestly, if you've never been out west, you're just going off of word of mouth of someone saying, this is the way you go when you get to this city. You're going to go ahead and head this direction. It's probably going to take you a couple of days. You don't know what the mileage is. And you're just going like, does anyone have a map? You're like, hope you get there.
When the sun starts to set, just head that way.
Yeah.
Follow the sun. You're just constantly
Put it at your
driving
back
into
for
it.
the early part of the day. Put it in front of you for the rest of the day.
Should be fine. February or May 1936. Oh, just to go back, clean up 1935. December 1935, estimates of 850 million tons. I think you mentioned this earlier.
Yeah, by 1940.
Of topsoil had blown off the southern plains just during 1935 alone. Just during that 1 year is what they said. The Resettlement Administration proposes that they start to buy up 2.25 million acres and retire it from cultivation.
It was basically homesteading in reverse.
Yeah.
They were paying people and being like, so we're going to give you money and you get out of here. You give us the land and just get out.
And once we retire from cultivation, we're going to get some of those buffalo grass seeds and we're going to sprinkle it back out there and hopefully it takes and holds it down.
We're covering all of this shit.
Got to do something with it. You got to start creating these green zones again. May 1936, the SCS publishes the Soil Conservation District Law. This is a pretty big law. It would allow farmers to set up their own districts to enforce the soil conservation practices, which makes total sense because if you want the farmers to be accountable for this stuff, you need to make them responsible enough to enforce it instead of the people back in Congress and D.C. that have never been out there and never seen this trying to enforce this stuff.
They just walk up on some guy's farm and they're like, Randy, you step over here for a second. We see you're not plowing with the contours of the land. Those furrows look pretty shallow. You're going to need to fix that, Randy. Quit fucking around. You're going to ruin it for all of us.
There were points in time where it was kind of like a rural martial law, where if somebody wasn't taking care of their farm, or you get one of those asshole briefcase farmers that just abandoned their stuff and took it over or and took off, you can go in and clean that stuff up. You can try to, market for purchase for whatever land act is coming through to rebuy this stuff. Or you're going to go and beat the shit out of some guy that's being lazy on his farm and not taking care of his stuff, or that's letting the the little meager amounts of rain that you get just go to waste.
Yeah.
We also got to talk about wells
Oh, yeah.
and windmills and how this thing works, because we're talking about an area that gets, again, 15 to 25 inches of rain on a normal period of time, dropping down below 10%. You still have to have water, not only to drink, but to soak all of these cloths that you're hanging on the windows to try to catch the dirt.
Try to provide water to these little meager, like, personal gardens that you're trying to use for survival. Yeah, had no idea windmills, they were used to actually pump water out of these wells. And there's an aquifer that is the largest aquifer in the United States. An aquifer is basically an underground reservoir of water. It's where water gets collected over hundreds of thousands of years of rainfall and everything. It's basically when you dig down, if you know anybody that lives out in the country that has a well, the well is drilled down to the aquifer, and then there's a pump installed to get the water out.
The Ogallala Aquifer.
The Ogallala Aquifer.
The biggest aquifer in the United States.
So it stretches for portions of northern Texas all the way up to, I want to say, like South Dakota, maybe right below South Dakota.
Huge.
It's huge. And so most of the agriculture that takes place in the breadbasket and in the Great Plains, think of these farms that you hear of now, fucking Nebraska, the Cornhuskers. It's nothing but cornfields and everything. They're all using this irrigation water from the Ogallala Aquifer. And kind of we'll touch back on that, I think, in just a little bit when we talk about kind of the future of what might be in store for the Great Plains. But like you were saying, they start to get some of this land recovered in this buffalo grass to try to kind of stabilize the area. Do you have anything before 38? Oh, yeah, you got a couple things before 38.
FDR's up for re-election. Things are going well in the country. There's already some signs of recovery.
As much as they can be.
Yeah. But at the same time, you got to get reelected to keep going on. So he goes on kind of these barnstorming tours for these reelection efforts. You got to do some work at home, though, first. Before you leave, you're in D.C., and you're running on a platform of taxing the richer people of society. And if you're taxing the richer people of society, they're probably not going to be on your side. And you
This sounds so familiar.
Yeah. You need these guys on your side because these are the guys that own the papers. These are the William Randolph Hearsts of the world that are just inherently shitheads that don't like their money being touched, even though they have so much more money than everybody else.
They're PACs.
Yeah. So he's at home at the White House trying to schmooze these people. They get caviar from Russia flown in and the finest wines from the Napa Valley in California. And FDR is trying to sell these people on just losing a little bit of money to taxes. I'm not going after the rich people. I'm going after the super rich people. And none of these people are really biting. So you have to go out and do boots on the ground, wheels up. You have to try to get out there and meet these people. And FDR ends up showing up to Amarillo. The city of Amarillo had, I believe it was a 50,000 people or 50,000 person population.
It was considered the largest city within the area of the Dust Bowl.
Yeah. FDR rolls into town. They said between 150,000 and 200,000 people had shown up for FDR to speak. And January 20th, 1937 is when this happens. Roosevelt gives this big speech. He says, I see 1/3 of the nation ill-housed, ill-clad, ill-nourished. The test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide enough for those who have too little. Speaking directly in the heart of the largest city in the Dust Bowl that do have too little. He's just basically working his way into these people's hearts. And it's maybe a sign of luck, much like that dust storm rolling into D.C., that as FDR is up there speaking, it starts raining. So hopefully, I mean, how do you get that lucky? You know that has to happen, but at the same time, you get a rainstorm after you're promising to try to bring this. And FDR is not a celestial figure. He's not somebody that controls the weather. He's not one of those guys.
I mean, it kind of seems like he might be.
Just luck. Just getting out there, stretching his legs, walking around this Southern Great Plains region and getting these people on his side. It leads to another win. He comes right back into the White House and gets reelected. March 1937, we get the Shelter Belt Project that Chris was talking about earlier. It called for this large-scale planting of trees like we were talking about across the Great Plains. Like I said, it stretched in a 100-mile wide zone from Canada to North Texas. The estimated cost was going to be $75 million over 12 years. Well, it turns out that when you space something out for that long, it actually kind of goes past the allowable of an emergency action that you're taking. So Congress reins him in.
Peter out a little bit.
Yeah. The project ends up being shrunk down. By 1942, I think you said there were 30,233 shelter belts that contained 220 million planted trees, covered 18,600 square miles, like 48,000 square kilometers. In most of the areas that these were being built in, now that we couldn't do the full chain, had to be broken. So you focus on farms, you focus on any sort of property lines between these massive farms that you can build these windbreaks. Because even if, the first farm might get hit, the second farm might get hit, but as these windbreaks start to grow and start to kind of protect the land a little bit, it's going to hurt less. You don't want to be on the outside of the windbreak. You definitely want to be in the middle.
Yeah, as long as it's minimizing the amount of topsoil, the amount of damage to the crops and everything like that, you can still consider that, I guess, successful. If it's mitigating it at all, especially like you said, if you're the third farm in, you're just like, oh, thank God.
Yeah, there's so many efforts that they're throwing towards this, and it actually kind of starts to work. Do you have anything before 38?
No. 38 sees 18 inches of rain. So all of a sudden, oh my God. It's back, right?
We're getting some stuff back. As you say, work in 1938, there's a ton of work replowing these lands into furrows. They're starting to do these techniques. They keep planting these trees along the property lines for the shelter belts. Other conservation methods that they're putting in a 65% reduction of the amount of soil that's blowing. So they're making a difference. They're changing the ecology of what's going on. And the part that we left out earlier about the gag about going to the Native American reservation and asking how long the drought lasts, the drought was supposed to last, they said it was usually a few years. It was 3 to 4 years after a good rainy stretch that this drought would last. The amount of problems that they caused the environment ends up stretching this drought so long. You said those rains returned, everything is still good. 1 year doesn't get you out of a drought.
No.
This drought's going to continue on.
This is where the flash floods kick in. So, best analogy I can think of is look at water in a parking lot. So, you look at water in your yard, it gets absorbed into the grass. Water out on the street all flows into the lowest point, those gutters, and you see a lot more standing water out in the street than you actually see in your yard. When basically this entire stretch of area that they're trying to have recover, a bunch of it, all the topsoil has been blown off and it's hard, compacted earth, the water's not soaking in. So you're getting these rains, but they're basically taking also any of the topsoil that they're then taking with it when they're flowing and they're all flowing together. You get these flash floods that are happening. So even when you do get the rain, it ends up not being the greatest thing ever because now there's this uncontrollable flooding because there's nothing to absorb the water.
Yeah, you can't win for losing, man. It just continues on.
Yeah.
And we didn't even talk about the second natural issue that comes up, the fourth affliction of maybe the issues that keep going on.
The grasshoppers?
The grasshoppers.
It's modern day locusts, basically. So you get these grasshoppers that even when they get a little bit of a recovery, this rain comes in, these grasshoppers start to like multiply and breed, and then they just sweep through these areas, just masses on masses, clouds of these grasshoppers that are at first moving in just on the ground. So maybe not clouds, but as they move forward and they're eating all of this stuff that, anything that's being planted to feed these people, they can't go out there and protect it from grasshoppers. No. There are these methods that are tried where they're trying to like use the combines to like capture grasshoppers in these fields and basically use a combination of like I don't know if it was arsenic, but I do think that it was like kerosene and stuff, which apparently cough's fucking medicine.
Yes.
What?
Yes.
They are giving these kids kerosene to try to like abate the symptoms of this dust pneumonia. Apparently kerosene was like tussin or something. Like, I don't get it.
I don't hate the way that kerosene smells, but the thought of tasting it and drinking it and somehow that suppresses your cough. Does it kill everything that was causing you to cough?
I don't know. Apparently they use it to, like, I don't see how you're like, well, it'll kill the grasshoppers, but it's okay to give to our children. But
Strychnine was another one that they used for the grasshoppers too.
yeah, but then what are you doing when you're putting that into the soil? You're further damaging the soil with kerosene and strychnine and all of these just poisons.
Yeah.
So nothing's going to grow even more so.
Yeah, apparently these grasshoppers were so bad that when they would crawl across like train tracks, it would actually derail trains because it would squish so many grasshoppers underneath the wheels that it would actually lift them off the track and slide them off and just cause massive destruction.
Someone said they ended up growing wings in somewhere around Kansas, and then that became these giant clouds of just grasshoppers rolling in.
Yeah, so if the drought wasn't bad enough, if the depression wasn't bad enough,
The rabbits weren't bad enough. Now we have locusts.
grasshoppers. It's insane how much this stuff, the toll that these people end up taking. 1939, hallelujah, the rain finally comes. It brings an end after the second year to the drought. You start to see these big, beautiful golden fields of wheat growing again. It kind of happens at a really, really good time because we start building up for World War II. The
Wheat will win the war again.
Yep. It all comes back around. You need the wheat production for wartime activities, and this drought has lifted. I'm going to say in no small part to some of these conservation efforts. There were a lot of times that FDR would be talking to Bennett, and he would say, do you believe that we can stop this, or do you believe that we can reverse this? And Bennett says, I got to be optimistic and hope that we can bring everything back, but he's like, I don't know how. Like there's no guarantee.
Oh, goddamn soil scientist.
Yeah.
That's what Howard's for.
Yeah, go get that guy. Go get the Brainiac.
But there's also never been something like this that's occurred.
No.
So of course you don't fucking know. You are literally dealing with the scope of it. To have someone being like, okay, so I know that, we've made some progress on this. We've developed these new farming techniques. But at the same time, there is so much, at least in the very short term, irreparable damage that we have caused across such a wide area. How do you provide an answer? Like, do you think that this can be reversed? Maybe.
Well, I think so much is attributed to regrowing this grassland. I mean, it worked for thousands of years before. And unfortunately, the time between you running the natives off the land and then populating your people didn't give you a good enough weather record to understand this rainy season, the droughts, all of this.
Here's the thing, too. The Great Depression, as far as like the crash of the stock market, that is wholly human caused. This happens, and this is human caused, but as a reaction of nature to what the humans are doing to completely throw this area out of balance. So one of them is solely man-made. The other is a natural disaster, very much exacerbated, it's a cause and cause and effect thing. Yes, you're still going to get the droughts in this area. That's unavoidable. That's just part of nature and the cycle. But the fact that when this happens and there are these droughts, you are creating an issue that has probably not been an issue ever before because nature has balanced itself out before and prevented this from happening.
Yeah. You created the dust storms by taking away all the grasses that had been able to survive these droughts before. You would think, being the evolved human brains that we are, there would never be another problem like this, right?
No, I mean, we know at this point too, we know that there's this cycle of droughts and these rainy seasons and then droughts. So, I mean, we definitely aren't going to repeat this again, in another 30 years or so, like in the 50s or anything, where, we fuck up the land again, but, oh no, we did do that. They tried to mess it up again, but thankfully these conservation efforts and these repair efforts were enough so to where it didn't happen on the scale that it happened before. And a lot of it was mitigated to where we're not talking about the 1950s Dust Bowl right now.
The war cycle created the stupidity cycle over again. Luckily, there were enough people that lived through the first problem to kind of mitigate the people that brought on the second problem. There were still dust storms in 1950 that were caused by, again, these briefcase farmers that would come out and try to pull the same scheme again, because we're talking about prices being raised through war again. So there's going to be more greedy people that are going to try to do it. Luckily, there were enough seasoned vets there in these districts that they created to just stomp that out.
Get the fuck out.
Yep.
Nope. Not again. Not again. We're going to be the only ones that are handling this.
You know, those are some shiny leather shoes. You're going to turn around and walk yourself back to the train in them. So the cultural impacts of the Dust Bowl, they were the way that this story was told. Musicians and authors and photographers documented the Dust Bowl. We got all three mediums of kind of media besides, I mean, I guess film is thrown in there, but they would make documentaries about this stuff and what's going on. Migrants influenced musical culture wherever they went. Woody Guthrie is kind of like the son of the Dust Bowl. His songs about the Dust Bowl experiences painted a picture of this Okie experience for the country to hear. Once he gets to California, he ends up getting a job on the radio. And he's playing this bluegrass country music while he's doing his songs on the radio.
Hey, it's Dusty Guthrie here, getting you through traffic. I'm going to tell you some real depressing shit, but in song form.
We got Bob standing up there on the traffic windmill. He's going to give us the report on the I-5.
It's fucking dusty out here, man.
But Woody Guthrie is reaching so many people through his music, telling them what these people lived through. You have this thing called Bakersfield Sound that still gets talked about in the country and bluegrass sphere. That was just this blending of music coming across the country, that it was brought wherever these cities that they were landing in were, they were still spreading this kind of cultural, I guess, history is through music. That changes so many different things. Wildly enough, these Okies ended up bringing country dance halls to L.A. That's the last place on earth I would ever think a country dance hall is showing up. But, I mean, they were there.
Yeah.
And you got to remember there's so many areas outside of L.A. that are farming communities that you just don't think about because it's L.A.
Yeah.
It spreads on forever.
California, you automatically think of,
Massive city. This lady named, this is an English name that I'm going to screw up. Her name is Dorothea Lange.
There you go.
Dorothea. I don't know why we can't go Dorothy.
You nailed it.
She ends up being hired. This is wild because we talk about propaganda so much as a negative connotation for things. Propaganda can get good things done too.
Yeah.
She's hired by the
They just don't call it propaganda.
Yeah. It's you got to call it something else, but in essence, that's exactly what it is. Farm Security Administration hires her to document this crisis visually. Her photos humanize these struggles of the Dust Bowl kind of Great Depression era. In the 1930s, there were about 300,000 men, women, and children that migrated west to California, and Lang documented this. She would photograph these family struggles living on the roads and in the streets of California. Probably her most famous picture, it's something that as soon as we started talking Dust Bowl, I can see it in my mind. It's the picture of the migrant mother. Her name was Florence Owens Thompson. And Dorothea talks about taking this picture where she started at about 15 feet away. She had both of the children. The woman has a child on each arm. She tells them to tuck their heads away so you can't see their faces. And then Dorothea starts walking in as she's taking these pictures, getting closer and closer. And you can see the progression of you can see the solemn look on her face in this 1,000-yard stare.
That's exactly what it was. It's 1,000. She's just looking into the distance of being like, it's that look like I've seen some shit and I can't get it out of my head.
Yeah. It puts a face to this struggle that these people in these cities don't quite understand. People out west aren't getting terrible dust storms. I mean, they're still probably getting a little bit, but California's probably not getting touched.
It was cloudy today. I mean, it was still 70. But
yeah, still very, very nice there. So
you don't get those dust storms coming off the Pacific.
Yeah, it's not happening.
Yeah.
It's
You get that ocean breeze.
you have the Rocky Mountains to protect you from anything coming over that way. This helps out a whole lot. These photos end up getting published. I've forgotten what magazine, but it basically forces DC to go into this quick aid response to these camps to kind of try to prevent this starvation. The key word there is going into the camps. You're not going into some of these little shanty towns that are built. You still have people struggling. In the meantime, you're still helping people. You're still trying to get everybody through it, but it does kind of maybe take a little bit of a burden off of everybody.
Yeah.
It's just there's so many people. 300,000 people come in the 30s. That's just from Oklahoma. It's from the Great Plains, not to mention everybody else coming over from the Great Depression. There's a woman named Sonora Babb. She was working for the FSA, the Farm Security Administration as well. And her job was to go into these camps and basically take field notes, take these people's stories down, just try to get as much information on these people as possible to, maybe try to help them as best as possible. But at the same time, you just kind of want to document this stuff so you can print articles and you can start to get the country, more firmly on your side. Sonora is also keeping kind of some notes to herself. She's keeping some personal stuff because she has these big plans to write a novel afterwards, which turns out to be a really great idea. You have a woman who's out there doing the good work and getting these people's stories down, has the brilliant idea to make that happen. Well, there's an author out there named John Steinbeck, great author. Maybe one of the handful of books that I've read in my life was The Pearl. It's awesome. It's a good short read. Ends up writing The Grapes of Wrath, and he writes The Grapes of Wrath based upon some of these FSA field notes that he was given access to. And he tweaks the story a little bit, kind of changes the point of origin for these people coming west.
Sets it in South Dakota, right?
I think it was South Dakota, somewhere up around there. He ends up putting it out in 1939. Babs ends up going to her publisher and shows them this novel, and they shelve it because of the reaction that The Grapes of Wrath got from Steinbeck just would have overshadowed anything else.
It's going to feel like a knockoff. It's going to feel like a ripoff when it's actually the OG.
Yeah. Yep. It takes until 2004 for Whose Names Are Unknown to come out for Babs. Babs ends up dying in 2005. She got to see her book out on the shelves for 1 year before she expired. But at the same time, it has to feel so good after so long to know that your story actually gets out. It's never going to be as big as The Grapes of Wrath.
Yeah.
Grapes of Wrath's turned into a movie.
It's required reading in most schools, yeah.
So much stuff.
Like Animal Farm or Charlotte's Web or some shit like that.
Yeah, and there's documentaries.
Oh, can't read Animal Farm now.
Really?
Yeah, it's too much socialist.
Oh, yeah, can't have that. These documentaries are made that are sent all over the country during the Great Depression. There were times, there was one town, I believe it was Boise City, had a theater in town that had closed down, and the people had gone to the owners of the theater and begged them to reopen it because it was like one of the only joys of life that they had was to go down there and see these movies.
The only semblance of normalcy.
Yeah. And before these movies, you would have the news because that's just how people consume this stuff. So they would end up showing up.
What's going on in the world today?
Yeah, exactly. So they'd be showing up in these theaters and they would be seeing visuals from other parts in the Dust Bowl that this stuff was filmed at. And some of the older guys were kind of mad because that pride thing kicks in and you know that this is being shown to everybody else in the country and you don't want to look weak. The kids had a completely different recollection of this. Like, yeah, that actually looks pretty accurate. That's about
we just want to live, man.
Yeah, it's what it is. There's no other way that you can gussy that stuff up. And the numbers that come out of the Dust Bowl as far as just losses, I believe there were more than 7,000 people that had died. There were more than 2 million people that were displaced. Just the numbers are startling to think that that's how many people.
That happened in what we considered a civilized place.
Yeah.
I guess one of the last things that I kind of want to mention is something just to think about for the future. And of course, most people listening to this podcast have no bearing or impact on how this is going to happen. But this is just something to kind of, we're not out of the woods in regards to this stuff. So they've done studies on the Ogallala. How do you pronounce this? Ogallala. The Ogallala Aquifer. So since it's been tapped into, half of the water in that has been used up to this point. And because of increases in more heavily water-dependent agriculture that takes place in the Great Plains, it's got about 20 years left.
Is that what it was?
It's got about 20 years left at this point. So there's not a replacement for that. So 20 years at the current rate of agriculture that is going on in the United States right now, regardless of selling overseas or doing whatever with it, 20 years from now, the water's going to fucking dry up out of that. And I'm not saying it's going to be a Dust Bowl situation because, of course, preventative measures, but agriculturally, the impact is going to be staggering. So not to, tinfoil hat or to, sound the warning bell or anything, but it's a realistic scenario that has a timeline. It's a ticking clock.
Well, the tricky thing about that is to go down and hit those aquifers, you have to drill your well so deep.
Mm-hmm.
If the Ogallala Aquifer is, I think they said it's like 100 miles deep or something like that. It's insanely, really, really deep. But if you drill 600 feet down and the water in the aquifer ends up dropping down further than that, your well runs dry.
Yeah.
So then you have to drill another well to go down even deeper in order to suck that water up. As soon as it drops down below that, you got to go even deeper. And so you're just constantly having to dig deeper into this land in order to make your crops happen. That doesn't happen overnight. Yeah. It takes a while to make that happen. And at the same time, to recharge that aquifer is going to take hundreds of thousands of years again.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
we don't have.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we have to stop farming, but we definitely got to look at some better ways to do this.
It's literally like looking at sustainability in it. Yeah. So yeah, not to end you on a bummer or anything like that. And we hope you guys enjoyed the episode. But yeah, just a scenario that could be playing out in our lifetime.
Yeah, we're pro family farm here. We're sort of anti big corporate farms because we all kind of know how their practices go. But at the same time, we got to figure it out.
It's the same kind of thing that they were doing at the beginning of Interstellar. That's what's going on. Is there's the new Dust Bowl in the West and everything like that, or in the Great Plains, just kind of with this scenario playing out. So
yeah.
But anyway, if you got anything else?
Good news is a lot of smart people in this country. Yes. A lot of people that can figure this out. We just got to get it figured out.
We just got to figure out how to create water.
Yeah. We've been really good at figuring these things out. I mean, they kind of ended what could have been a very prolonged drought.
Yeah.
By doing these things again. Hell, we got guys home from the moon. R.I.P. James Lavelle. We didn't call your death, but you died today.
Yeah. So the Pope took a little bit longer.
Yeah, a little longer.
Jim, really sorry to hear about that one. Something that happens to Ireland, natural disaster, we're going to have to start rethinking topics.
Yeah.
Just in case this podcast has been provided too much power.
Yeah.
Cross your fingers.
If we got too much swing, this is going to turn into a post-mortem podcast very quickly.
Only strictly dead people. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us on this episode. We'll catch you next time.
Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for another episode. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe and like button. Follow us. If you didn't like what you heard, still hit that anyway, because we'll probably cover something in the future that you do like. Please follow us on our social media. Adam, hit them with it.
Our Instagram is historically high pod, historically high pod, and we are on Twitter at historically high. That's historically HI.
All right. And if you guys want to send in any feedback, suggestions, hit us up on those two, or you can even do it on Gmail. It's historicallyhighpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Peace.